be seated. Honorable members, I wish to acknowledge the grade 11 and 10, in fact, the grade 10 and 11 child learners from Fezeka High School in Gugulethu Comprehensive. Welcome. These are future parliamentarians. The first item on the order paper is questions addressed to the Deputy President. And of course, just to remind honorable members, you may press the talk button on your desks if you wish to ask a supplementary question. The first question has been asked by the Honorable L.L. van der Merwe. The Honorable, the Deputy President.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, honorable members. I'm informed that the Minister of Social Development has instructed SASSA, that is the South African Social Security Agency, to ensure that the distribution of social relief of distress, which was at issue in this case, is strictly provided in accordance with the provisions of the Social Assistance Act of 2004. Social relief of distress is a legalized, or legislated rather, and necessary program of immediate material assistance to people who live in this country, be they citizens, residents, or refugees, who at one point or another experience crisis situations in their lives. The relief is provided in various forms, and the relief can include the handing out of food parcels, the handing out of vouchers, school uniform, humanitarian assistance during a disaster, or cash under certain circumstances. The relief is provided without prejudice or indeed favor, because it is based purely on the beneficiary's immediate dire circumstances. The Minister's instruction is aimed at ensuring that only recipients who qualify for social relief distress in terms of our law will receive it, and that only departmental or SASSA staff will be the ones who will distribute it. And in this regard, government respects the Office of the Public Protector and accepts that the remedial action she takes is binding unless reviewed or set aside by a court of law. Government is furthermore committed to ensuring all members of the executive abide by the executive code, ethic codes, and that all state resources are used with great care and for the purpose for which they were allocated. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable van der Merwe.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you very much to the Honourable Deputy President. I think I appreciate the comments that you made in terms of the Public Protector and her findings being binding, and we thank you for that, Honourable Deputy President. But for me, this is an issue that goes to the very heart of our democracy, Honourable Deputy President, and we recently saw the IFP witness how ANC officials and SASSA officials, just a day before a by-election, brought in trucks of food parcels, and we've got the photos here. And this is not an isolated incident. In fact, now with every by-election, you will find the same situation. And I think then one can't advance the argument to say that those food parcels are only distributed on a needs basis, because quite frankly, there's an election element or a campaigning element to those distribution. And my question, therefore, to you, Honourable Deputy President, is, do you think that the measures that you've just outlined will actually go far enough to ensure that you put an end to this practice, which has become entrenched? And do you believe that a failure to do so will actually render the upcoming local government elections not free nor fair? Thank you.
The Honourable Deputy President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I believe that the measures that I just read out, including the fact that all political parties are party to the signing of the Electoral Code, which code provides that the elections must be run on a free and fair basis, and that there should be total tolerance. And overall, as a government, we believe that state resources should not be used for party political interests, and that we should not be advancing party political interests through state resources, because state resources are there for all South Africans, for all the people who live in our country. And therefore, I do not believe that the coming local government elections will be jeopardized in any way whatsoever. I have full faith in our adherence to our democratic values, our democratic principles, all of us as political parties in South Africa. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Chauke.
Ndikoleboha ngamanda mudadza mupresidente vo Cyril Ramaphosa. Lexi ni lavaka ku xi tivisa na ku ri mi pfumelelana na mina i ku ri mhaka leyi ya ku distributa swakudya swa vanhu vo hlupheka a hi nawo kusuka ka nhlengeletano wa African National Congress ku ri yi tirhisa ku humesa swakudya ku va yi kokela vakheti va kota ku yi kheta. Na mi pfumelelana na mina Deputy President. Xa vumbirhi ku ri milawu leyi nga kona hi nga yi veka leyi mi nga vulavula hi yona yi tiyisela ku ri ku fambisiwa ka swakudya leswiwani swi fambisiwa hi ndlela ya kahle, ku nga vi na munhu ka ti-level hinkwato ta government kusuka ka national na province na timasipala, ku nga vi na munhu la tirhisaka swakudya leswiwani ku va a kota ku kokela vakheti, ku nga ri ntsena African National Congress. Hi endla xifaniso futhi na hi Western Cape ku ri na bona nawu lowu wa va khoma na bona na.
Honourable the Deputy President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Loko ni bula hi nawu loyi, hi bula hi ku u fanele ku ri u boha vanhu hinkwavo. Loko hi ku u boha vanhu hinkwavo, hi bula ku ri hi fanele hinkwerhu ku ri hi landzela nawu loyi. Na hina va African National Congress wa hi boha nawu loyi. A swi buli ku ri u boha van'wani ntsena. Swilo leswi swa ku nyika vanhu swakudya swi fanele ku ri swi famba hi nawu lowu wa palamende lowu nga vekiwa. Swi nga endleliwi ku ri hi xava ti-vote ta vanhu, ku ri hi lava ku ri vanhu va vhotela nhlangano leyi kambe liya. Na la a Western Cape na hambi i ri kwihi na kwihi ku fanele ku ri hi landzela nawu loyi, ku ri swakudya na swin'wani swo tala leswi humesiwaka hi government swi nga endleliwi ku ri swi va swilo leswi xavaka ti-vote ka vanhu. Government u fanele ku ri a tirhela vanhu hinkwavo hi ndlela ya ku fana, va nga kheti ku ri loyi u ta mu nyika leswi hi ku yena u fake t-shirt ya khala leyi kumbe ya khala leyi. Hi sweswo leswi hi swi bulaka. Leswi swakudya swi fanele ku ri swi nyika vanhu hinkwavo, ene nakona swi fanele ku ri swi landzela nawu lowu nga tsariwa hansi. Ni khensile.
The Honourable Masango.
Thank you, Speaker, Honourable Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Deputy President. The exploitation of vulnerable South Africans during ANC election campaign is widely reported and documented. It has even sparked outrage in the ANC's own Facebook page. And at numerous occasions, people have said to us that they are tired of seeing food parcels only during election campaigns. So the question would be, I would like to ask the Deputy President, how will the government ensure that there will be no trucks driving around asking people to vote for ANC while handing out taxpayers' food parcels and ANC paraphernalia? And also, will the Deputy President please explain the steps he will take to prevent this exploitation from happening?
The Honorable, the Deputy President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I should say that we clearly need to make a clear distinction on this. Social assistance is one of those weapons that the government is using to fight poverty. That is what we are doing. So when people who are in distress, when people who are in need are given one assistance or another, be it food parcels, be it blankets, be it a number of other assistance measures, it should never be read as the ANC, which is the governing party, buying votes. The ANC does not need to buy votes through giving people food parcels. The ANC as the governing party has enough experience, has the right policies, and has enough capability to convince people to vote for them rather than through buying them through food parcels. So the food parcels that are given out, and they are also given out even in non-ANC controlled provinces. The Western Cape does so, and indeed other provinces. And you can therefore not say that when people are hungry and are under stress and distress, when they are given assistance, that it is for buying votes. That you will not see from the ANC. We give people support because they are in need. That is what we do as the ANC.
The Honorable Kwankwa.
Thank you very much, Speaker, Madam Speaker. Sekela Mongameli uyapolitika nyani ngoku. Ndiyakubona. But recently, even the report, I want to extend this matter a little bit further to include the matter here, EPWPs, Extended Public Works Programs. In the Standing Committee on Appropriations, the report of the Standing Committee on Appropriations, a budget vote, highlights it as an observation and the concern of the politicization of that program. It's a matter that we've raised in the past as political parties that did not receive much attention. But I think now that it's contained in a parliamentary report, something needs to be done by government because it's very prevalent. What is your government going to do to ensure that the EPWP program is not used as a tool to prop up the ruling party's campaign in an effort to try and show people that you're creating jobs now that the elections are around the corner? Thank you.
The Honorable, the Deputy President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The IMC, which the President has asked me to chair, which deals with public employment programs, deals with matters that affect employment, EPWP, and we get sight of precisely what is happening throughout the country. The issue that you're raising had been raised in the past, and we have made sure that public employment programs are not used for advancing the party political interests of any party. And when the governing party, which is the African National Congress, set out its targets and objectives, that it will create 6 million job opportunities, and we're almost halfway to that target now. It was not aimed at getting its supporters into these programs. It was aimed at getting a plethora of South Africans to participate in this. And I'd like you to believe me that I have spent quite a bit of time going throughout a number of our programs throughout the country. And I often take time to ask people privately to say, are you satisfied with the way the public employment program is being run? And nearly all of them say, yes, we are satisfied. And they even go further to say the councillors who are here and the officials who are here are doing it on a very open and transparent manner, and they invite whomsoever in the community to participate. So that gives me a great deal of satisfaction. But I must say, however, Honourable Member, that you do note the comment that we have made, and as the IMC, we will make sure that these programs are forever utilized to advance the interests of all South Africans. So thank you for raising it again. We will keep a watchful eye on precisely that type of behavior. Thank you.
We now move to question number 6, which has been asked by the Honorable Sheikh Imam of the NFP. The Honorable, the Deputy President.
Honorable Speaker, the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa clearly outlines the process of the appointment of members of the executive councils in our provinces. And Section 132 of our Constitution is quite clear on this, in that it states that the executive council of a province consists of the premier as the head of the council, and no fewer than 5 and no more than 10 members appointed by the premier amongst the members of the provincial legislature. The premier of a province, therefore, appoints the members of the executive council. He or she assigns their powers and functions, and he or she may dismiss those members that he or she appoints. I'm not aware of any plans by the government to amend the Constitution to give national ministers the powers to appoint MECs in provinces. As it is right now, it does not happen in any of our provinces, as MECs are appointed by premiers. National ministers and MECs are nevertheless expected to continue to work closely on matters relating to their specific departments, as envisaged through the constitutional principles of the interrelatedness and interdependence of our constitutional architecture. And in this regard, the concept that we crafted when we drafted our constitution of cooperative governance is given more life through the way in which national ministers and MECs cooperate to advance the interests of South Africans through the various departments in which they are deployed. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Deputy President, this is exactly what my point is. If you look in that gallery, Honorable Deputy President, in that gallery, I have Charmaine Adams, who lives in the city of Cape Town and has applied for a house for 25 years, and nothing is happening. We have in that gallery Daniel Butland, 65 years old, living in an RDP house without a roof for 5 years. We have Shireen Peterson also living in this gallery, no water and sanitation for over 20 years. We have Tasnima, who will tell you, Honorable Deputy President, they cannot even go out after dark. We have 80-year-old Lena Van Fokkel, who will also tell you, Deputy President, that the RDP house that she is living in is falling to pieces. Now, Honorable Deputy President, we have Marianne Adams who will tell you that due to no sanitation, feces are dumped outside their homes, which is a health hazard, with no health facilities. Now, Honorable Chair, Deputy President, in light of the fact that these decisions are made by government, by national, that MECs are appointed by premiers, this seems to be some limitations. And as a result thereof, all these people that are underprivileged, suffer the
Honourable member.
consequences. What is Department of Government going to
Your
do
1
about
minute is
providing
over.
a quality health and a quality life to our people, given the fact that your powers are limited and MECs make the decision and marginalize our people because of who you are and what you
Honorable
are?
Sheikh Imam, your time is over. The Honorable Deputy President.
Honorable Speaker.
Point of order, Speaker.
Was the Honorable DP, can you please take the seat while I take the Honorable?
Speaker, I apologize to the Deputy President for interrupting him. But can you, we've had the gallery participating in proceedings today. Can you please remind the gallery not to participate, please? Thank you.
Indeed, our honorable guests in the gallery are kindly requested not to participate in the goings on in the chamber. Not by raising your hand or clapping your hands. You are just expected to be neutral spectators that sit and observe. We, with respect, would appeal to you. Honorable Deputy President.
Honorable Speaker, thank you. And I think Honorable Imam has added a lot of color and texture to his supplementary question by having some of the people that he's referring to in the gallery. And I take it that they are all based here in the Western Cape. And that being based here in the Western Cape, they are experiencing all these problems and difficulties as a result of one failure or another by the government here in the Western Cape and by the relative MECs. Now, I really feel touched, truly touched, and I'd like to say to those guests who are here in the gallery that we really apologize for the failing of our government to meet the aspirations that they all had, that some of them live in RDP houses without roofs. That should not be the case. They should not be living in houses where there are feces that are flowing right in front of them. They should not be on a waiting list for houses for more than 20 years or so. That we apologize for. But in the end, in order to make government more effective, government does need to be closer to the people, and MECs and indeed councillors that we appoint need to be the type of councillors who are going to pay close attention to the needs of our people, who are going to know the experiences of our people, and in the main, they should be people from the community so that they can associate more closely with the needs of our people. And I don't know whether that is the case here or not. And all I can say, Honorable Imam, is that these matters obviously need to be addressed and attended to. And I would say that clearly there needs to be attention that is given. They should be reported to the government here in the Western Cape. And indeed, even the National Department should be willing and be prepared to take them up to see the extent to which we can assist our people who have taken the trouble to come here to Parliament. And that is something that we ought to be doing as a caring government and as a government that takes the interests of our people at heart. So I would welcome the opportunity that this problem should be put to government officials initially here in the Western Cape, and if nothing happens, they should also be escalated at the national level. Thank you very much.
Then Honorable Mileham.
Thank you, Speaker. Deputy President, at the outset, let me state that this question is bizarre in the extreme. The Honorable Sheikh Imam would do well to read the Constitution, and if he has read it, to try and understand it. In addition to what the Deputy President has already said, Section 41(1)(g) of the Constitution states that all spheres of government and all organs of state within each sphere must exercise their powers and perform their functions in a manner that does not encroach on the geographical, functional, or institutional integrity of another sphere. And yet the Honourable Sheikh Imam would have the national government usurp that constitutional authority by having national ministers appoint MECs in another democratically elected sphere of government. The Honourable Sheikh Imam would do well to examine the shocking state of
Honourable
affairs
Speaker.
in his one municipality
Point
that
of
they
order,
do
Speaker.
govern.
Order. Is that a point of order? Is it a point of order, Honourable?
Yes, Honorable Speaker.
Honourable Milham, can you take your seat? Yes, Honourable.
No, one was laboring under the impression that the honorable member would ask a question, but seemingly he's now casting aspersion on our member. We take a very strong exception to that. He must focus on his question.
Honourable, Kodjubani Kamalako, honourable members. Yes? Honourable Kubisa, Ngiyaxolisa. The honourable member has a right to actually make his point, including by making a commentary before he gets to the question. Hopefully, Honourable Milham, you'll get to your question.
Yes, Chair. So the Honourable Sheikh Imam would do well to examine the shocking state of affairs in the one municipality they do govern, namely Zululand District Municipality, before he throws stones at the best-run municipality and province in the country. So my question, Deputy President, is this. What steps are being taken in the national sphere, and here I'm talking about both executive and legislative, to hold provincial governments accountable? Where are they reporting on their key performance indicators? Who oversees their budgets and expenditure? What actions are being taken to bring underperforming provinces, and more specifically, corrupt or maladministrating provincial executives into line?
Honourable Deputy President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. As I answer this question, I thought that what Honourable Imam had been referring to was the extent to which you could also strengthen cooperative governance, the interdependentness of all spheres of government, rather than stress on there being separate forms of government or spheres of government, to stress more how these spheres of government can work together to advance the interests of our people. And that is the approach that I would take, that how do we deepen cooperative governance? And the second part, I guess, of the question or the statement is how is national government ensuring that there is good performance in all spheres of government? We have the Presidential Coordinating Council that is chaired by the President that at all times, whenever it meets, seeks to review precisely what is happening in all provinces. And that structure is aimed at deepening the cooperation amongst all provinces in relation to national government. And when it comes to budgets, we've got this fiscal commission that is meant to do precisely that. The Auditor General, in the end, is the one who keeps a clear check of what is happening in provinces and indeed in national departments in relation to the expenditure of our finances. So there is sufficient check and balance between the national and the provincial. And clearly, we do need to deepen that, to broaden that, to make sure that it becomes more effective. If there are any ideas that the honourable member is able to put forward as clear proposals, I invite him to bring them forward, so to bring his wisdom forward, so that we can be better enlightened on how all forms of government or all structures of government can work better. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
The Honourable Hlengwa.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Deputy President, I would like to welcome your initial response before to the original question. To say, as a staunch federalist myself, believe the power needs to be based at grassroots, bottom up. And what we need to do, as you correctly say, is that we need to give greater emphasis to cooperative governance. So my question is, Honorable Deputy President, has any consideration been given to the Van Zyl-Slabbert report, which seeks to reform the electoral system so we can ensure greater accountability and ensure that we do not have just the proportional representation system, which has elected representatives mainly accountable to their political parties and not to the communities. For us to be able to strengthen the balance that you speak about, we need to transcend the power even further. And secondly, just quickly, is the issue of the min-max. How do we strengthen those bodies to ensure that the cooperation is there and that the departments speak to each other from provincial and national government? And to what extent can then those be transcended down to local government municipalities, where in the essence all development is local and would need to strengthen local government? So just those two issues, Deputy President. Thank you very much.
The Honorable, the Deputy President.
The proposals that were made by the late Van Zyl-Slabbert are one of those many proposals that have been floated around in relation to how we can effect some changes, some twiggings to our constitutional architecture. And those matters are matters that all of us need to consider. All of us as political parties, we need to debate those. We need to see whether they have any form of efficacy, whether they will suit even the times that we live in. And if we can get to the point where we believe that the types of proposals that were put forward by Van Zyl-Slabbert, and indeed many other constitutional proposals that have been put forward, we should debate them and see the extent to which they can be taken forward. So that is my answer to that one. And in relation to how can we make sure that the various levels of government speak to each other, in government as it is now, the way we have been able to tighten this process that you're talking about is through the continuous meetings and coordination of government work through the meetings of ministers and MECs. The MINMAC meetings continue and take place on an ongoing basis, dealing with real-life situations, real-life projects that affect the lives of our people. So that enhances the coordination that we have in government, but more broadly, there are many other structures that we have. For instance, the PICC, the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Council, also involves quite a number of people from provinces, the Presidential Coordinating Council that I spoke about, and that helps us to coordinate the work that happens in government at all levels. And when we come to local government as well, provinces do take care themselves to make sure that the various municipalities in their domain do actually coordinate things jointly with them. And this they do by definition, and this they also do by virtue of the laws that we all live under. So there is quite a lot of coordination, and where coordination can be made better so that each level of government speaks to the other, we need to look at that, and the ideas that may be put on the table are ideas that we would be quite willing to consider. Thank you very much indeed.
The Honorable Boy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you for being for such eloquency, Deputy President, in how you have put the issues up. The challenge is, and what the member have raised, is that it seems as if there's a continuously inefficiency in all the structures that you have outlined in the Western Cape, that they are not able to do the work that has been given to them by the national government and even by the Constitution. How do you assist in that environment, Deputy President, to be able to get to assist the people that are presently on the gallery? And it's quite clear that the honorable member is raising it out of that context, that he is quite worried about the state of things in the Western Cape.
The Honorable, the Deputy President.
What Honorable Sheikh Imam has raised clearly is a matter of great concern to us at national government level, that we have a plethora of problems that are being experienced by our people, some of whom are here in the gallery. And clearly, when it affects housing, the Minister of Human Settlements would be very, very concerned that such laxity of implementation of various rules and regulations is happening in this province, and if it's happening elsewhere, she will be the first to be concerned. And if it regards water, the Minister of Water and Sanitation will also be worried. In the end, the national government must, by definition, have oversight over what happens throughout the country. It must have oversight and get involved. And we should not hide behind the leaf of some constitutional provision which says, leave us alone, because we live in a country where there has to be cooperative governance, because we are dealing with our people whose needs are urgent, and we need to redress the imbalances of the past. So therefore, we cannot just say, no, leave us alone, we are this province or that province, we know what is best to be done. So my answer to you is that oversight role by national government should mean that, yes, we should get involved in making sure that the provinces do actually implement what they are meant to implement to advance the interests of our people. Because we cannot allow some of our people to live in terrible conditions whilst others live in much better conditions. The national government cannot allow that. Thank you very much.
I now come to question number 7 from the Honorable Khadebe, and I call upon the Deputy President.
Honorable Speaker, just a few weeks ago, a top-class delegation of some 200 people from South Africa, which had been constituted as Team South Africa, went to the World Economic Forum meeting in Kigali in Rwanda. Rwanda, the land of 1,000 hills. Now, this multi-stakeholder team, which represented our country, came from government, business, civil society, and a number of media representatives as well. And in all their engagements during the WEF Africa, the members of Team South Africa conveyed one common message to the rest of the continent and indeed to the world. And that message was, South Africa is a desirable, dependable, and worthwhile destination for investment. What the team had essentially gone to do was to go and make contacts with a number of people who tend to attend those types of conferences, and hopefully to move from contact to contract that will bring investment into South Africa. Members of Team South Africa participated in various formal sessions of that forum. Many also had bilateral meetings with business people, with government people. There was a lot of intergovernmental discussions with a number of people from various countries. And in our interactions as government, and based on the feedback that we got from a number of business people who attended, we thought and felt that our message as a country was well received. Those we met with were well informed about South Africa and appreciated the important role that our country plays in the economic and social development of the continent. They agreed with our message that South Africa has a dynamic and stable economy with solid economic fundamentals, and that our democracy is also robust, mature, and that it is a secure democracy, the type of democracy that gives rise to a stable country for investments. They recognize that South Africa also has a sound regulatory framework that provides protection to investors, and that we have a diversified economy that offers world-class business services as well as infrastructure. And Madam Speaker, several of the people we met raised issues of political stability, and we're keen to know how South Africa was responding to the difficult global economic environment. And when we explained to them that the foundations of the South African economy are strong enough to withstand the current turbulence that we're going through, a number of them felt that this could be a good destination for investment. And our African brothers and sisters felt that South Africa should continue to be the gateway through which investments can flow into the continent, and indeed were even more keen to welcome South African companies that operate in their part of the continent. So, Madam Speaker, we had an opportunity to share experiences and also to learn from what others are doing on the continent. A number of African countries are truly rising, and they have a lot to offer us as South Africans in relation to a number of areas of life, and we were very pleased that we were welcomed with warm arms in Rwanda and that we were able to share our experience and learn a lot from those that we met. So we had a fantastic journey. Team South Africa flew the South African flag very high in Rwanda. Thank you very much.
Now, honorable members, before I call on supplementary questions, may I remind honorable members that we should only ask one supplementary question. I now welcome Honorable Khadebe to ask the first supplementary question.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. First of all, I'd like to say Happy Africa Day to all Africans and South Africans. Honorable Deputy President, one of the founding fathers of the OAU, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, said that the liberation of the continent, political, was going to come from the north, but the economic emancipation of the continent was going to come from the south, from South Africa. It is really appreciated that all the other leaders of the African continent see South Africa as a gateway to investment into Africa. But one of the shortcomings of the African continent is the lack of the intra-Africa trade, the lack of quality foreign direct investment, and also the lack of infrastructure which can promote trade within the African continent. And our own NDP recognizes the fact that South Africa now, at this point, only trades about 30%. 30% of its trade is with the continent. And then it expects that by 2030, it must be 30%. The trade must be with the continent. What is the current crop of the African leadership doing to attract foreign direct investment and promote intra-Africa trade and ensure that there's proper infrastructure to promote the growth of the African continent? Thank you.
The Honorable the Deputy President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, much of the discussions that took place in Rwanda had to dealt with how we can get African countries to be more interconnected. Not only in as far as digital matters were concerned, because that was the main theme of the conference, but also when it comes to trade, and also how we can enhance infrastructure development that will lead to the people of Africa being able to trade better with each other, being able to travel a lot easier, and being able to do the developmental work that we are meant to do as a continent. So all that occupied quite a lot of space and time in that conference, and what we found pleasing was that the talk about infrastructure, be it electrical, be it roads, be it the internet, be it river or dams and laying out water, was common amongst all the participants who were there. And indeed, we found, very pleasantly, we found that all the African countries that were there were just talking about the same thing of infrastructure development. And as we all know, infrastructure development can lead to the connectedness of our continent in as far as trade is concerned. Trade was one of those issues that was highlighted quite strongly, that in order to advance our economic fortunes as a continent, we need to be trading more and more with each other, but in order to do so, we need to extend those infrastructure link-ups that we should have, like roads and rail and what have you. But then the main focus, as I said, was the extent to which we can use technology to extend the levels of connectedness on the African continent. And we found that technological advancement was speeding up the progress on the continent in exponential ways. And that we found quite pleasing. And in the end, without being arrogant, without being forward at all, South Africa was able to present itself as a good destination for investment, but we were very careful not to project ourselves as the best in class. We projected ourselves as being part of the African continent, as being willing to develop in tandem with the continent, and where we can lend assistance, we should do so, and where we can learn from others, we should be able to do so. And we concluded that we've got a symbiotic relationship with all countries on the continent, and our task as South Africa must be how best we can advance the interests, not only of our own country first, but also of the continent as a whole when it comes to matters of development. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Mainir.
Thank you, Speaker. Now the Deputy President tries to assure us that South Africa's message was well received at the World Economic Forum. But of course, that's not what the transcript of his media briefing in Rwanda on the 13th of May 2016 suggests. The truth is the Deputy President had to convince observers that South Africa, as he concedes, was a stable democracy. Here's the Deputy President, and I quote, "In relation to the political landscape, South Africa is a stable democracy. What people read about in the media is not unique to South Africa. We can assure observers that South Africa is a stable democracy." So will the Deputy President tell us whether it was embarrassing to have to convince observers that South Africa was a stable democracy at the World Economic Forum, and whether in the light of this, he's now considering running for the leadership of his party and removing the Honorable Jacob Zuma as President of South Africa?
The Honorable, the Deputy President.
Honorable Speaker, I can tell Honorable Mania that it was most uplifting to tell our brothers and sisters on the African continent that South Africa is a very stable democracy. We've got a durable democracy. We've got a stable constitution that enhances our stability. And we were also quick to applaud, listen to this, we were also quick to applaud a number of other countries on the continent that you may not know of that are so stable. Countries that have embraced democracy, countries that are moving in tandem with us on the democratic stability route and making sure that that democracy yields economic benefits. Now, we've gone beyond where you are, because you are still very parochial, my dearest Mania. You are still very inwardly focused. We are now looking at the benefits of stability, the benefits of democracy are economic development. And that was the buzzword, and you were not even there. I mean, really, seriously. You should have come along with us. Next time, do come along. The buzzword was economic development, how we can use our strength, which is our democracy, the human capital that we've got in our country and indeed on the continent to bolster our economic fortunes. Now, I will ask you a question. Are you prepared to run for the leadership of your party and oust Maimani? Maybe you should answer that question first, because we as the African National Congress have no problem. We've got a strong leadership. that is leading the party, that is leading the country, and you just look around. All these leaders are charging ahead, and you will see for yourself on the 3rd of August. Thank you.
Honourable Speaker,
No, Honorable Mainir, you've
I will
had
be
your
happy
chance.
to answer the question if the Deputy President answers the
You
question.
have
Is
had
he
your
running?
chance, Honorable Mainir. I now would like to have the Honorable Kubisa to ask a follow-up question.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Deputy President, I believe among a plethora of issues they've referred to, there was some focus on the issue of good governance, job creation, poverty, unemployment, health conditions, knowledge exchange, wealth sharing, terrorist attacks, and climate change. Would you say at the end of the conference, these matters were given urgent attention? Thank you.
Honorable Deputy President.
I can say without any equivocation that yes, they were given attention. And what also made sure that those matters were ventilated and were attended to was the presence of a number of leaders from various countries. It was not only President Kagame who was there, President Kenyatta was there, a number of presidents from the west of Africa were there, and they made sure that issues that are germane to the development of the continent were actually addressed. And all those issues that you mentioned, including climate change, Honorable Member, were also addressed. And let me say that they were addressed with a deep sense of seriousness. And they were not just ticking the box. These leaders, and indeed the delegates who were there, were actually focusing. And they were focusing in a way that went to looking at the numbers, the financial indicators. The president of the African Development Bank was there, playing a key role in the conference. And as a banker, he was able to say, we are prepared to finance the building of this dam, this road, and this railway, and so forth. So many of the issues that you are raising, and including issues like terrorist attacks, Kenya has been exposed to a number of these. They were also addressed and attended to. And they were addressed within the context of 2063, the objectives that the continent has set up for itself. But it also went beyond that. They were also addressed within the context of the UN MGDs. So we were sitting there and not only discussing issues on a parochial basis that affect one or two countries. We were looking at the global goals that all countries have set up for themselves, but we were also looking at ourselves as Africans in terms of 2063, where we want Africa to be. And the other buzzword was the Africa that we want. We were saying, what type of Africa do we want by 2063? And we were asking ourselves, are we already on the journey to achieve that Africa that we want? Are we already implementing some of those goals that we have set up? So in that regard, that forum was a really meaningful forum for all who attended, government, business, media, civil society. It was an uplifting type of forum, but it was also a focusing forum to get us to focus. And let me conclude by saying many people who attended said, we are tired of just hearing speeches. We now want action and implementation. And they said, we want African countries to now go beyond just speechifying. They must now talk about implementation. That is why the African Development Bank was also there. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Esther Reason.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Deputy President. Energy is essential for economic growth, and you and all the delegates was shown a very comprehensive map showing all of African countries and populations and all their various degrees or percentage of access to electricity. And as you just said now, that you discussed on one of the things how all African states can work together, was it not a concern then to yourself and your fellow delegates that a fellow South African state with the potential to supply the continent of Africa with clean, affordable electricity is failing not only their own people, the Democratic Republic of the Congo has got 68 million people without electricity, but also us, who signed a treaty with the DRC in 2013 and was obliged to pay $10 million American deposit. Construction was supposed to start on October 15 last year, and to this time, when October 15 came without a sod being turned. Rwanda was the right platform for this. Was this discussed, or will the Grand Inga project only remain an African dream? Thank you.
The Honorable, the Deputy President.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The issue of energy, indeed clean energy, was one of the central issues that was discussed at this forum. And I'd like you to believe me when I say that the Grand Inga project was also one of the centerpieces of discussion at this conference. The heads of states who were there were talking in the main economic development underpinned by energy generation. It was quite pleasant to hear all these heads of state talking firstly about economic development and saying, in order for us to get there and to have this development, we've got to have energy generation. And they went beyond that, Honorable Speaker. They were now relating the number of megawatts that they are now putting in place to boost their energy generation in their various countries. And then the African Development Bank also reflected on a number of projects, and the Grand Inga project was then also referred to, and it was referred to in a way of saying, we now need to take it forward. And this is where it is stuck. This is what now needs to be done to move the Grand Inga project forward. So I remain confident that the logjam and the bottlenecks that were there in relation to the Grand Inga are logjams and the bottlenecks that are now going to be removed, particularly also as the African leaders will be meeting in Kigali in August. They are also going to discuss this, and the Grand Inga project is also being discussed in a number of other forums. Now, the good thing is that South Africa remains connected and involved with the Grand Inga project, so we are part of it. We have already put some dollars on the table, and we want to see the Grand Inga project moving ahead. And we remain convinced that in order to see the economic regeneration of Africa, energy, and particularly clean energy, is going to underpin all the efforts that we are involved in. And many countries are already moving forward on the energy landscape. And you watch and see. The map that you will see of Africa in the next few years is going to be a bright lit map, because many of our countries in the African continent are going to be generating energy exponentially. And we are marching ahead as a continent. And this being Africa Day, this is something that we should be celebrating, that we are part of an African continent that is on the move. Africa is wide awake, and Grand Inga is going to be a reality, no longer a dream. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy President. We now come to question number 8, asked by the Honorable Dudley of the ACDP. The Honorable, the Deputy President.
As I was saying, today we join our fellow Africans across the entire continent in celebrating this great day for all of us as Africans, Africa Day. It is a day when we remember the great sacrifices that were made by our forebears, how our leaders have charted us forward to get to the point where we are as many African countries. And we are also enjoined by our continental organization, the African Union, to continue the work towards peace and stability, sustainable development and prosperity of our continent. And guided by these objectives, South Africa, our own country, has participated in the post-conflict reconstruction and development of South Sudan since its independence. We remain engaged in conflict resolution efforts in South Sudan. In this context, we have just returned from a working visit from Juba, where we've been engaged with various role players with a view to consolidating unity within the Sudanese People's Liberation Movement, the SPLM, moving from the premise that unity within the SPLM is a critical component of the creation of peace and stability in South Sudan. We have worked alongside the Secretary General of Tanzania's Chama cha Mapinduzi to unify the various factions of the SPLM. We have also worked with regional organizations, the African Union, the United Nations, and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development in East Africa, also known as IGAD. As a result of these efforts, all factions within the SPLM have now returned to Juba in South Sudan, and a new transitional unity government comprising of all these factions has now been formed, and it is in place. During our visit, we had an opportunity to meet President Salva Kiir, the first Vice President Riek Machar, and the Foreign Minister Deng Alo, and all of them representing the various groupings of the SPLM. All these groupings of the SPLM remain committed to the consolidation of peace as a necessary step towards ending conflict completely in South Sudan. And we can say without any doubt that the guns of war have now been silenced in South Sudan, and the various leaders of that country are now involved in the process of rebuilding peace and rebuilding the lives of their own people. And as co-guarantors of the Arusha Agreement, South Africa will continue to provide the necessary support to the SPLM to consolidate efforts towards the post-conflict reconstruction and development of that country. The people of South Sudan deserve the benefits of peace and stability as a stepping stone towards sustainable development and prosperity. As a country, we commit ourselves to working hand in hand with the people of South Sudan on their journey towards a peaceful and prosperous society. And they welcome the assistance that they are getting from various of their partners around the world, and they are very pleased that South Africa and Tanzania are involved at close range to assist them to rebuild their own party, but also to stabilize their democracy in South Sudan. So we had a good journey, and a journey that was quite worthwhile in terms of the richness of the interaction that we had with the people that we met. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Dudley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honorable Deputy President, thank you for the feedback. As a result of peace agreements being violated and the unstable situation, the country's economy, of course, is in crisis, and the South Sudanese pound has declined in value, and the cost of goods and services skyrocketed, with food prices at a record high. Have you and your counterpart discussed the South Sudanese economic and fiscal crisis, and has South Africa been asked to assist in any additional way? If so, what are the relevant details? And we're also particularly concerned, as are many others, with a situation where there's a camp in Juba where about 200,000 people have not been receiving UN aid, and everyone is concerned about what is actually going to happen to that 200,000 people. And we were wondering if you had discussed this or you have any information that you can give us. Thank you.
The Honorable Deputy President.
The needs of the people of South Sudan are plentiful. They span quite a number of areas of human endeavor. They relate to health, they do relate to security as well, and they relate to the displacement of not only 200,000, but hundreds of thousands of their own people who are displaced internally. People who now face famine and hunger because the economy has been going through enormous challenges, particularly because the economy is dependent very much on oil extraction. And the price of oil having come down as it has, it means that they face serious challenges. The assistance that we've been giving to the people of South Sudan has been giving a lot of support in terms of building up their structures and making sure that their party functions well. And clearly, they need much more than that. They need much more than just words. And these are matters that they continue to raise with us, and we will need to find ways of how we can assist. We've also been giving them institutional support in terms of getting their people to be better prepared in terms of capacity building so that they can run the institutions that are present in their own country. Now, when it comes to those people that you're referring to, it was raised with us, and there are efforts to get not only the UN, but a number of other agencies to lend support, not only to the 200,000 people, but to hundreds of thousands of other people. And the work of beginning to get them to go back to their homes is also about to get underway. So the challenge that is faced by the people in South Sudan is huge. And we remain privileged that we've been trusted enough to give them the assistance that we are giving at the moment, and it's assistance that they truly appreciate in many, many ways. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Kwankwa.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Deputy President, I would like to approach this question from a slightly different dimension. Over the past few years, for instance, South Africa has played a critical role in trying to ensure that there's peace, democracy in Africa. We have been net exporters of the values of democracy in Africa in particular. And when we look at that record, it fills us with a great deal of pride. However, you will agree with me, Deputy President, rather, it's too soon for you to call you President. Honorable Deputy President, that takes a lot of resources, right? Now that it takes a lot of resources, the question I want to ask, in light of the fact that we're number 3, we've lost our second position as the second biggest economy in Africa, now we're number 3, to what extent does government then make sure that when we invest resources in Africa to try and make sure that there's stability, we balance it with our national interests, economic interests in particular, so that we don't create stability in those countries for other people to benefit from it? Thank you so much.
The Honorable Deputy President.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Kwankwa, you can be rest assured that clearly, as we move around and interact with various countries, what we seek to promote is South Africa's interests. But we seek to promote that within a broader context of our being part of the African continent. So we are Africans, and being Africans also means that when we advance our interests as South Africa, we also must see the interests of the continent also being advanced. So the two, in our view, are not mutually exclusive. They are inclusive, and we can approach them jointly at the same time. So when we lend assistance to South Sudan, by definition, we're also lending assistance to our own interests as South Africans, and that's how they see it. But they give us a lot more respect, a lot more room to maneuver by noticing that We are not selfish, we are not parochial. As we advance, we are also helping them to advance. And that is who we are. In a way, you could say that is our DNA as South Africans, and that is the type of DNA we must be spreading around. So yes, advance our interests within the broader context of our African agenda. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Mukhalapa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Deputy President. President Key signed a compromise deal on the 26th of August 2015. However, he enclosed an annexure that included a list of 16 reservations that he strongly deemed important to self-determination of South Sudan. And this would impede on the attaining lasting peace. The question is, sir, what have you done to address this 16 reservations in order to avoid regeneration of violence and the collapse of the peace agreement in South Sudan? I thank you.
Honorable Deputy President.
The agreement that was signed by the leaders of South Sudan is a living document. It's a document that they are walking through themselves. And in a way, it was a confidence-building measure. When he listed all those reservations, he was basically saying, these are issues that need to be addressed. And on a daily basis, what we have found and what we were briefed on, the issues that he had raised as big reservations, a number of them are beginning to wilt away, to disappear, as confidence is being engendered. The confidence levels are rising on an ongoing basis, largely because the leaders of South Sudan realize that they can no longer return back to war, that war is not an option. The only option that exists in South Sudan is peace, and how to consolidate that peace. So reservations will be there, but they are the type of reservations that are melting away. When we had an engagement with President Salva Kiir, very little of the reservations were even raised. He was very much more positive, and indeed the other leaders were also very positive in wanting to move the peace process along, aiming at the 24 months or the 30 months that they have, during which time they will go to elections and elect a new government. So the unity government is beginning to function. Yes, do they have challenges? Here and there they have challenges, but they are dealing with them on an ongoing basis with the support of a number of friends that they have or partners that they have. And we happen to be privileged that we are one of those partners that they trust, one of those partners that they know that they can work with. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Kuno.
Thank you, Speaker. Happy Africa Day to all of us. May our identity be part of our inspiration. South Africa has been in the heart of peace talks in South Sudan. Following Arusha's agreement that the Sudanese People's Liberation Movement has signed, there were concerns that if not maintained properly, it will create problems in the future. Deputy President, can you expatiate on the programs that we have here in South Africa as part of post-conflict reconstruction and development to sustain and maintain the effort that our country is doing through your mediation? I thank you.
The Honorable Deputy President.
One of the things that we have been able to share with the people of South Sudan is the experience that we gained from our own transition. A transition that continues as we continue to build our nation, to build our country, and to develop it in a number of ways. We continue to share this with the people of South Sudan, and they have found our own experience as very encouraging. Encouraging in that they, having come from colonialism and having come from a war that they fought, they have now achieved peace that was disturbed, but they now know, they also know that they can actually have permanent peace, and our experience stands out as a very, very good precedent and a lesson to them. And so therefore, our engagement with the people of South Sudan and the leaders there, and indeed with the various organizations that we tend to interact with, is a process that is very, very enriching in that we are able to share with them precisely the journey that we have traversed and the journey that we continue to traverse as we build our nation, and we inform them how we've been able to overcome a number of difficulties and challenges, some of which challenges they are currently going through. And recently, we've also been able to outline to them how we went through a government of national unity and the challenges that are inherent in that type of process. And this is what they are now learning from as they are now united as a government of unity, moving towards consolidating unity of their own party. So the experiences that we are having with them are really great experiences, and we believe that will help them consolidate their peace. And they are also learning a lot from the Republic of Tanzania as they learn from Chama cha Mapinduzi. So the process in South Sudan is a process, Madam Speaker, that we can be proud to have contributed a little bit in consolidating. And as it consolidates further, I'm sure as South Africans we can be proud that we've made a contribution to the rebuilding of a nation that was devastated by war and colonialism. Thank you very much.
Honorable members, that concludes questions to the Deputy President, and I thank the Honorable, the hard-working Deputy President. Honorable members, we now come to questions to ministers in the Peace and Security Cluster. And I now call, we come to question number 87 that has been asked by the Honorable D.D. Gamede to the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans. The Honorable, the Minister.
Thank you very much, Speaker. As we indicated during our budget vote debate 2 weeks ago, we've established a defense review implementation project team called DRIPT. The financial year 2015-16, of course, will be devoted to planning the implementation of the Defense Review 2016. The DRIFT consists of 2 military and secretariat planning teams, and the DRIFT has already identified non-cost or minimal cost-driven interventions which will improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of our organization. The plan is based on ministerial priorities whose implementation will be key to the realization of the targets of the first stage of milestone number 1 of the Defense Review 2015. You will recall, Chairperson, that, and honorable members, that milestone number 1 of the Defense Review talks to, 1, arresting the decline of the capabilities of the Defense Force, but also the rejuvenation of the South African National Defense Force itself. So some of the critical areas identified here is developing a proper defense funding model, a human resource renewal strategy, a capability renewal, and the continuance of the ordered operational commitments. In this regard, Chairperson, 2016-17 Annual Performance Plan consists of 12 outcomes which can be achieved within the current budget allocation. These are as follows: sustained ordered defense commitments,
capability sustainment and renewal, maintained defense capabilities, facilities, restructuring of the South African National Defense Force, Department of Defense Human Resources Management, enhancement of military discipline, etc. Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Gamete.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Honorable Minister, due to the fact that most of the time you've played a role in bringing peace and stability in Africa, I also wish you a happy Africa Day. Now, the question is, how will the turnaround strategy ensure the building of capacity and capability in the state to pursue its developmental goals, peace and stability in the region, the continent, and the world? Thank you.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Gamete and honorable members. A happy Africa Day. Honorable Gamete, as you know, I was just mentioning right now some of the key and milestone number 1, which lays a foundation for the rest of the 4 milestones which have been identified by the Defense Review Committee. Now, Honorable Gamete, you know that one of those talks to capacitating the Defense Force, and we believe that this is one of the key priorities of the Defense Force. The training and ensuring that you have a highly professionalized, disciplined Defense Force is going to be the key and a foundation to building the kind of Defense Force which will make the kind of interventions which you have referred to. But also to talk to issues of discipline. If there is no discipline amongst our soldiers, obviously we will run into problems in terms of ensuring that there is peace and stability within the continent. And of course, based on that, as a member of the Portfolio Committee, you would know that there are certain steps we've had to take as quickly as possible where there have been transgressions by our own forces to withdraw them back to South Africa. Now, there is milestone number 2, which talks about rebalancing the force. During this milestone, the department, of course, will primarily focus on the balance and configuration of the military capabilities as specified in our defense review. There's milestone 3, which talks to capacity of the force, and milestone 4, which talks to responding to the threats, strategic threats to South Africa.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. You may pick it up later. Your time has expired now. The next supplementary question is from Honorable Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, we know that we require 1.8 billion rand to fund Milestone 1, which is a 5-year program, and with 5 milestones, it's a 25-year program. Milestone 1 is arrest the decline. In other words, stop the decline in the Defence Force, and we know already at this stage, this 1.8 billion rand over the medium term was not granted by the National Treasury. That's a fact. You and the Secretary of Defence has also confirmed that we cannot fund Milestone 1 and that many other essential services and equipment we also cannot fund from this medium-term budget indications. Minister, is it thus not a more responsible and defensible alternative not to procure the new VVIP aircraft, whether it's lease or purchase at this stage, and rather spend this money on Milestone 1
Honourable
and other
Member,
essential services?
your time has
and
expired.
do you not agree that this will be more in the best interest
Honourable
of the Defence
Murray,
Force
your time
and South
has
Africa,
expired.
and not that of the ANC executive? I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Murray. I think that let me start by saying, yes, you are right. There is a shortage of funding. We don't have funds to implement part of the defense review. But I think as a member of the portfolio committee, you should also appreciate the fact that there are certain steps which we have taken to see how best and what it is that we can do to get extra funding for the Department of Defense so that we can implement some of the plans which we have at our disposal. One of those which we have done is to audit the properties of DOD countrywide. And we now know the exact value of the properties we have in the Department of Defense. Reason being that perhaps we can use those properties to leverage and get some funding to do some of the things which we need to do. Now, on the matter of the VVIP, it seems to me, honorable members, this is a matter which we have to talk about and agree on and close it. There is no way in which right now the Defense Force can avoid buying a VVIP aircraft. In the same way that there is no way in which we can deny the reality that we need a strategic airlift capability. In the same way, we know that there's a shortage of many other aircrafts. Some of them are simply parked there, which we cannot maintain. As for the VVIP aircraft, you know, honorable members, that the responsibility, whereas the security of the principals lies with the police, but the transportation and safety in that aircraft of the VVIPs is a mandate of the Department of Defense. And one of the issues which I've constantly raised is you can't continue. I'm sure your former president before democracy used to fly SAA. Is that so?
Honorable Minister.
Okay.
Honorable Minister.
Then Honorable Murray, just to say that there is no way in which you can avoid this, because in the first instance, you have to ensure that the principal is safe. Whoever is in the aircraft are people you know.
Honorable Minister,
I've often,
your time has expired.
I'm
Let's
sorry
move to the
because
next.
I had to
Please,
respond
please.
to that.
Honorable Msibi, the next supplementary question. Honorable Msibi. Honorable members, it appears someone pressed that button without there be no further supplementary questions. We'll move to the next question. Asked to the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services by Honorable Singh. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The constitutional provision referred to by the Honorable Member empowers His Excellency the President as the head of state to choose from the list of 3 names more than the number of appointments to be made as recommended by the Judicial Services Commission, judges of the Constitutional Court. It provides the Honorable President with a discretion as to who to appoint to the Constitutional Court and forms part of the distinctive procedures provided for by the Constitution in relation to the appointment of judges to the Constitutional Court. This provision was included by the drafters of the Constitution in recognition of the significance of the status of the Constitutional Court, which is the highest court in the land. Whilst it is true that there were no sufficient candidates for the recent vacancy at the Constitutional Court, it is worth stating, though, that the process of nominating candidates to serve as judges in the Constitutional Court allows for any person to nominate any fit and proper South African to that court. As a member of the JSC, Honorable Singh is well aware that all of us, including the Honorable Member, are permitted to approach any fit and proper person who are South African residents to be considered for appointment at the Constitutional Court whenever the Judicial Services Commission calls for nominations. Before we consider any other options, we should therefore first look as to whether we are exercising our civic duty of nominating candidates to the Constitutional Court. With regard to the possibility of any amendment to Section 174(4)(a) of the Constitution, the matter has not arisen at the level of the executive. However, should the honorable member deem it desirable to have the Constitution amended, as he suggests, he should consider raising the matter with the Constitutional Review Committee of Parliament. I thank you.
Honourable Minister, Honourable Singh.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. That I will do, Honourable Minister, but I asked you the question because it's born out of the fact that recently we had one vacancy and we only had 3 applicants. We couldn't consider them because you have to suggest to the President, as you said in terms of the Constitution, 4, 3 plus 1. But now we've got a second vacancy with Deputy Chief Justice Dikang Motsoeneke having retired, and we want to congratulate him on the excellent work he did for South Africa as a patriot of South Africa. Now the question is, it is common knowledge, Deputy Minister, Minister, that academics are not easily and readily considered for appointment as judges. Now, the normal practice, although there have been some exceptions, Cato Reagan, etc., is that you must be a magistrate and then a judge and then you go to Concord. Should we not be considering very seriously academics who've been through the legal fraternity in recognized tertiary institutions and consider them as suitable nominees that we can interview for appointment to Constitutional Court? Thank you.
Madam Minister.
Yes, indeed, when the Constitutional Court started back in 1996, it was a blend of not only serving judges, but also members of the academia. Since then, I think the trend has been to have persons who are currently serving as judges to be appointed to that court. This is the subject which I think the honorable member may want to introduce again as a member of the JSC for debate, so that if there is an underlying policy consideration that merits debate, that engagement can take place so that we can resolve the issue. What the Constitution, however, does say is that at least 4 of the 11 members of the court should be serving judges. It does not limit the number of persons to be judges, so they could all, technically speaking, be judges, but there is a view that ideally, given the nature of that court and the kind of policy matters that come before it as matters to consider constitutionality, that perhaps there should be a blend of different backgrounds that constitute that particular bench. So in a sense, there is some support for that view, but perhaps that is a matter that should be put squarely before the JSC, since it is the body that recommends appointments to the President. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable Brittenbach.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Mr. Minister, does the lack of suitable candidates not emanate from the way in which the interview process is conducted? And this makes certain suitable candidates unwilling to make themselves available. And if this is the case, what will you do to address this problem?
Honourable Minister.
I unfortunately do not chair the JSC. The JSC, as you are aware, is chaired by the Chief Justice. He determines how proceedings should proceed, and if, of course, there are circumstances that, in his opinion, should be dealt with in the course of interviews, either himself or any other member of the JSC should be in a position to raise those matters. I am not aware of any candidates who otherwise would have made themselves available, but for the manner in which interviews are conducted. But however, if there are concerns, firstly, I would urge those concerned to raise those formally with the JSC preferably through the Chief Justice, so that those matters can be put on the table for discussion at the JSC and solutions found. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Mpumlana, LKB.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Minister. It seems that candidates for appointment to the bench are not only limited, but the pool itself lacks demographic diversity. One of the methods that could be employed by the department is to increase the pool of candidates, is to ensure there is preferential briefing of black and female advocates by state litigation, just to give them enough experience. What steps has the department taken to facilitate enlargement of the pool of candidates for appointment as judges?
Honorable Minister.
Should I go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
Well, Deputy Speaker, I agree with the sentiments expressed by the Honourable Member, and it is indeed for this reason and against this background that the department has launched the transformation of the State Legal Services project in order to facilitate the preferential briefing of black and female advocates for state litigation. The department appointed a project leader to drive the transformation of the state legal services in order to address this and other challenges. A policy of briefing is being prepared to ensure that black and female advocates are given preferential treatment as well. The policy will render clear guidelines on implementation across all state attorneys' offices and across the public service generally. Currently, some 76% of briefs issued by the state attorney is allocated to black advocates. But I do know that concerns have been raised even in those circumstances, that the briefs are not necessarily transformative, in that judges themselves continue to lament the fact that in some cases, high-profile cases, you find that the entire team of lawyers representing particular government departments are all white and all male. So those are some of the challenges that, through the intervention strategies, such as the project I've just alluded to, are intended to address. The project leader is driving these strategic matters, and the following can be reported as achievements thus far. Creation of a development initiatives for previously disadvantaged individuals of the minimum threshold to allow the JSC to conduct interviews and propose nominees.
Honorable Minister, your time has expired.
Thank you.
The next question is question 83, asked to the Minister of Police by Honorable Sheikh Imam. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. In the light of the fact that I have a 4-page reply to this question, could I please solicit your permission that I table this particular reply?
The Honorable Member, I suggest that you speak to it. Honorable Imam is here waiting to ask you a supplementary question.
No, thank you very much. I think the first part, now that you have asked me to speak to it, the first part to the question in replying to it is that it stipulates and it identifies the entire procedure in terms of what steps are being followed and have got to be followed in addressing the question of complaints. And in relation to the second part, whether or not one could consider appointing an independent team to address the specified complaints, that particular area resides with the respective and relevant provincial commissioner who will assess as and when the need arises whether or not to escalate the issue, that such a request could then be granted. Thank you very much, sir.
Honorable Imam.
Honorable Minister, Sheikh Imam has just gone to the doctor. But Honorable Minister.
Honorable Kubisa.
Yes, yes.
You should allow us to know first before you inform the minister. We are the ones who must handle that.
My humble apology, Deputy Speaker.
Yeah, you see? Order. Honorable Sheikh.
It's a miracle.
You shouldn't leave when you know your question is coming in future. You have placed Honorable Kubisa in an invidious position. Now, I don't know what supplementary question you are going to ask because, yeah. Proceed, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. At least there's some humor in the House today. Honorable Minister.
No, Honorable Member, you're out of order. You're out of order. You can't do that. In fact, you shouldn't say that. Just withdraw it. You can't say the Honorable Member is drunk. Withdraw it.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I sat in this row. The member said it's a joke. Nothing about drunk.
Honorable members, you start playing those games, you are going to get it back at you very viciously. Don't invite it. Don't. Honorable member, you keep screaming, and the next time you do it, you are going to have to leave the house. Okay? Honorable member, this member in front of me here, and he does it repeatedly. What's wrong, honorable member? I think honorable member here is being contemptuous. And honorable member, I think I'm going to ask you to leave the house.
Well done.
Honorable member, the honorable member does it repeatedly, not once, every day, and I think I take exception to that. Honorable Steenhuisen, what are you raising on?
Deputy Speaker.
Yes, honorable member.
Every single one of the ANC or DA speakers last week had to be subjected to being called sellouts by the ANC benches, and the presiding officers did nothing about it. I'd like to know what rule you're using to eject my member from the House.
Honorable member, in the first place, I've spoken to the member repeatedly that he shouldn't be screaming. Honorable member, just wait a minute. You can't ask me a question. Honorable member, Honorable Steenhuisen, I thought there would be reason for you to appreciate why it is important for us to keep order in the House. If there is no order, if the member continuously interrupts and screams, Honorable, I deal with every member in the House. I do. I am, Honorable Kwankwa, what are you raising on?
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I'm rising to make a request to you. I know but the request I want to make to you is that, we normally listen to you when you say, Honorable Member, don't do that. Can you say that so that we can move on again without you ejecting anyone from the House, please?
Honorable Kwankwa. Honorable members, the rule that requires us to be orderly, to listen to the chair when we ask you not to do things, and you repeatedly continue to do it, is Rule 51. And when you contemptuously refuse to allow us to conduct the House in that order, you will have to go out, honorable members. Honorable Steenhuisen, and you know that rule. Yes. No, I'm telling you, Honorable Steenhuisen, I'm asking you to realize that your insistence of doing that is out of order, honorable member. Honorable No, honorable member, I warn you. I warn you. If you repeat, I'm going to do that. Honorable member, can you stop doing that? Stop doing that. I'm not talking to you. I've told you who I'm speaking to in the first place. I warn you, honorable member, if you repeat your screaming at me and in the house, I'm going to throw you out of the house. You can be sure of that. Yes. Honorable members, let's proceed. Go ahead, honorable member, with your question there.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Honorable Minister, if you look up at that gallery there, all these people seated there are victims of crime living in the Cape Flats. Neglected, marginalized, left to suffer only because they are not rich, not famous, and not privileged. Most of them have lost their loved ones. We have the Sober family there who lost her father. We have Siobhan Cupido who lost her father, who was a police officer sergeant, murdered. We have 6 other murders in the last 3 weeks in Hines Park alone. There are allegations, and the Community Policing Forum chairperson will tell you, allegations of corruption, collusion, including with political parties, with drug addicts, with gangsterism in the area. Now, lots of these people have made inquiries, and despite all the inquiries, they are enjoying no privilege, they're enjoying no satisfaction whatsoever. Now, Honorable Chairperson, Deputy Speaker, and Honorable Minister, Constitution talks about freedom. The most freedom that these people enjoyed is the last 2 hours that they're in Parliament. They don't know what is freedom. They don't know what is safe. They don't know what is secure environment, Honorable Minister.
Deputy Speaker,
what are we going to do? What are we going to do to create that environment so they can live, so that they can live in a safe environment and be treated equally to everyone else?
Deputy Speaker, according to Rule 1136, a member can only ask a follow-up question for a period of 1 minute. And I'd like you to enforce that rule,
honorable
please.
member, I'm looking. You just interrupted. The clock is in front of us. There's a clock here. I don't control the clock here. You are disrupting a member unnecessarily here. There's a clock here, and I'm looking at the clock. I don't need you to tell me what time it is. Take a seat, honorable member. You've asked your question. Honorable Minister.
No, thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I think it's a very crucial question. The question of how do we go about creating safe and secure environments where we live as ordinary citizens. For starters, I think the starting point would be that around the specific issues that you have just raised, which of course you'll appreciate is the first time I hear that there have been specific sort of incidences and grievances that do need to be addressed. I would really appreciate if those could also be brought to our attention so that we're able to begin to address them, at least at our level. That's one thing. The second thing is that we have got to mobilize quite an integrated effort right across the social spectrum. First and foremost is the question of the provision of policing infrastructure, which is quite an issue. For instance, the issue of police stations, mobile and or otherwise. We are prioritizing Western Cape, for an example, for about 6 mobile police stations in the next few months and so on. But the second thing related to that is also the question of social and community work in terms of the creation of necessary structures that have got to be blended and work together collaboratively with law enforcement agencies to look at these questions that are raising around the question of the creation of safe and secure environments. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Mulebatsi of the ANC.
Ke go leboge motlatsa mmusa kgotla, ke go leboge tona ka karabo e manontlhotlho.
Give him a chance, honorable member. He's handling a contraption there for his ear. Go ahead, honorable member.
mme ke tswelele ka gore the new structure of the SAPS makes provision for a national management intervention division. In a case of a station or unit where systemic trend of allegations of corruption are made against police officials, would the National Management Intervention Division be deployed to address the situation? I thank you.
Honorable Minister, go answer the question, especially the first part.
The first part, Deputy Speaker, was just thanking me for for my beauty, I suspect. No, but seriously, on this question, the National Management Intervention Team is largely designed to look at the question of performance at police station levels and so on. So in case you have issues of corruption and any other allegations, it would really largely depend on the nature and character of such allegations. But we would certainly know, Honorable Mlevatsi, that the question of such allegations, for an example, they need to be channeled largely to rather independent bodies that can then look into allegations of that particular nature. But the point of emphasis on the question of the National Management Intervention Team is more to do with trying to improve, making interventions with a view to improve levels of performance at police station levels. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Honorable Matsi, ke tokelo ya gago mma gore o bue ka Setswana o bo o hetse potso ya gago ka Setswana o ska tshaba ha re ska ra tswa o bua dipuo tsa rona ebile tsatsi le ke Africa Day. Honorable Mbele.
Ngiyabonga, Sekela Somlomo. Reminding this House that policing is in fact a national competency and that therefore complaints of corruption and collusion are for the ANC national government to answer. I put it to the Minister that the key reason for failure to reduce corruption and collusion in the police service is the weak enforcement of accountability. Now, last week, the suspension of the KZN Police Commissioner was more than a year overdue since findings of alleged involvement in supply chain corruption were made against her by the IPID. And in fact, Minister, you have been complicit in this culture of impunity because when the director of the IPID, who is now the subject of a political witch hunt and suspension against him, when he wrote to you on 13 January last year in this letter recommending that you intervene in that situation, you neither responded nor acted accordingly. So my question, Minister, is why are you so soft on enforcing accountability for corruption and collusion in the police service?
Honorable Minister.
I just do think, though, Honorable Mbele, that there is a contradiction in your very same sort of assertion. The one part you say we are soft. On the other side, you are also making specific examples about where we have had to act, for an example. Now, and your gripe appears to be around the time it takes to get there, right? Now, we will all know and appreciate that when it comes to issues of discipline, be it legal and or otherwise, and even administratively, there are particular processes that you do need to ensure and follow. Because if you don't follow those particular processes, you run the risk of conducting unfairness, for an example, when it comes to dealing genuinely with the issue at hand, and so on. So the point here is that I do think that you are mistaken to think that we are not taking corrective action where it needs to be taken. We actually do. And you know that for a fact, sir. Thank you very much.
Honorable members, Honorable Singh, oh yes, Honorable Singh, your name is here. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Deputy Speaker. I thought you'll miss me out for the second time. Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Minister, unfortunately we do not have the benefit of this 4-page answer because maybe it answers to the question, which is not the people of the Western Cape, but the people mainly in Lenasia and in Bayview. Now, my information suggests, Honorable Minister, that in the Bayview Flats area, the incidences of drug abuse is alarming. What we want from you is an assurance that you will get your Commissioner of Police or your task team to instigate an investigation unannounced. No police must know about it at the local police station, because what happens is they themselves go and inform people in the area that there's going to be a raid, everything gets hidden. There are items like jelly tots which are being used to carry drugs. And I've been informed, and I say this under parliamentary privilege, that a known dealer is the brother of a local ANC councillor in that area. So what we want to know, want from you is an assurance that there will be this unannounced raids in the Bayview Flats
Honourable
area.
Member,
Thank
your
you.
term has expired. Honourable Minister.
No, Deputy Speaker said, thank you very much, Honourable Singh, for such a suggestion. We'll definitely follow it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The next question. Are you Honourable Mkwanko? What's that, Honourable Member?
No, I'm rising on a point of order. Deputy Speaker.
Yes, yes.
Well, it sits very unwell with me that the Minister of Police was allowed to complete his Q&A session without having taken out his handkerchief to wipe his face. Has he forgotten it at home by any chance? I miss it, please.
Honourable Member, take your seat. The next question is question 89, asked to the Minister of Police by Honourable Biekman.
So at least I've done it, Deputy Speaker said. Yes, the provisioning of the topics concerning professionalism and ethics and ethical conduct forms an integral part of the basic training learning program and is offered by the trainers who were orientated before commencement of the program. Professional conduct is the very first module, which include topics such as patriotism, the SAPS Act, the core functions of the SAPS, objectives, vision, mission, and values of the SAPS, human rights as guided by the Bill of Rights, dress code, human resource policies such as sexual harassment in the workplace, minimum information security standards in the SAPS, the SAPS discipline regulations, corruption, anti-corruption strategy, Batupile principles, employee health and wellness, and diversity. Ethical conduct is an important value stressed throughout the basic training learning program and the organization as a whole. The initiatives are as follows. The Code of Ethics was developed for the SAPS and reflected in the basic training learning program, which refers to integrity, respect for diversity, obedience to the law, service excellence, and public approval. The Code of Ethics is also supported by the Batupile principles, which guides public servants in values, service standards, and delivery. The Code of Ethics deals primarily with police functions that are based on the Constitution of the Republic. The fundamental duties of the SAPS is to serve the community, safeguard lives and property, and protect all citizens against violence and intimidation, as highlighted in the NDP. The new recruits are trained to adhere to the SAPS discipline regulations as reflected in paragraph 1A. This type of training is reinforced upholding the ethical values that are inculcated in the new recruits. The ethical principles are also reinforced and demonstrated in specific modules in the basic training learning program, such as dealing with victims of sexual offenses, domestic violence, vulnerable persons, as well as the use of force in terms of Section 49 of the Criminal Procedure Act. Ethical considerations play a role in the above mentioned due to the fact that human rights need to be considered as enshrined in the Constitution of the Republic. Work ethics and anti-corruption is woven as a golden thread throughout the content of the program, keeping the community to be served in mind and in line with the anti-corruption strategy. The Code of Ethics for SAPS is also brought into the program, highlighting specific ethical principles and conduct in the workplace, and this is supported by presenting the code of conduct for SAPS members. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Honorable Beekman.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, Honourable Minister. Thank you very much for the response. We welcome the fact that professionalism and ethical conduct forms part and parcel of the new basic training learning program. It's a clear indication that the process to develop a new generation of police recruit is well on its way. We believe all communities should support the process to ensure that all policemen and women act professionally at all times. The follow-up question, whether the new revised basic training learning program of the SAPS have been benchmarked with other international jurisdiction policing training programs. Thank you.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. In relation to specifically that question, in addressing our training needs and the manner in which we needed to move forward, it became essential that we also needed to conduct research on an ongoing basis, but also largely benchmark ourselves in accordance with international standards. We benchmarked, for an example, our training program against the UK program, which is a 2-year probation program, as well as the Namibian Police Basic Training Program, which is a 6-month duration kind of program. The Los Angeles Police Department, which is a 6-month program, as well as the New York Basic Course for Police Officers, which is for a duration of about 4 months. So it became necessary that we also needed to ensure that in reviewing and refining our training programs and the duration thereof, we needed to take into account what the international benchmark and standard is in this regard. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Honorable Kebekulu.
Angithokoza sihlalo sela somlomo hlonishwa ngqongqoshe sekuyinto ejwayelekile nevamile ukuthi nxa ngabe kukhona imbhikisho yokunganeliseki nxa ngabe kukhona ukunganeliseki ebantwini ngokwethula kwezidingo zabo kube khona umphumela omubi la khona ogcina kube khona abantu abaswelakalayo noma abalimalayo bephethele ezibhedlela. Umbuzo wami cishe ufana nokamhlonishwa obenza umbuzo wokulandela. Uthi-ke, what is the comparative difference in the training process that SAPS new recruits undergo in terms of the theoretical and practical aspects of the training in order to handle service delivery protest without fatal consequences, given the new reduced training period? I thank you.
Deputy Speaker, am I allowed, sir?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much, sir. Firstly, the question of what you referred to in the visit, we are putting, for an example, if you look at the current training sort of program as we have it, before we had something like 2 days or 3 days of public order management and policing as part of the initial stages of a training program for new recruits. Now, it's no longer 2 or 3 days, it's actually 3 weeks, a full course on a question of crowd management, for an example. Precisely because our work as the police is such that we have got to respond to the demand of the time. And the demand of the time is that we have more regular sort of social activities in the form of public protests and so on. And therefore, we need to be adequately sort of equipped to be able to deal with that. The first stage is to deal with the mind of a police officer, for an example, in approaching a crowd management situation. The second issue that we're also focusing on, and I think we're briefing the portfolio committee today, is the question of how do we then inject efforts around the question of equipping ourselves adequately to manage crowd situations and so on. So, and that's the issue that also was spoken to by the Falam recommendations, the Falam Commission of Inquiry. So we are having a specific project that is also addressing that particular issue. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Mbele.
Ngiyabonga futhi Sekela Somlomo. Minister, now, while a revised training curriculum for police cadets is great, and we discussed this in Portfolio Committee this morning, it means nothing if the SAPS is actually shrinking. A recent reply from you to a DA parliamentary question revealed that almost half as many new police officers came out of the SAPS training academies into active service in the previous financial year compared to 4 years ago. Furthermore, the numbers showed that the last 3 financial years of graduate numbers represent a more than 50% aggregate drop in outputs compared to the 2 financial years before that. This trend spells medium to long-term disaster for the fight against crime. So, Minister, in light of this, how will you provide strong political leadership to fix human resource management in our police service? Or would it not, in fact, be better for you to manage your human resources out of cabinet?
Honourable Minister.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I think that point is a relevant point insofar as having got to assist us in ongoing engagements, for instance, in refining human resources development front, for an example, as an institution. In looking into the whole aspect of, for an example, how do we, in case you have a research work that tends to tell us or tends to point in the direction that you seem to be suggesting, that indeed we would have to engage with such facts and so on. But the fact of the matter is we continue to attract young people into the South African Police Service, and we subject them to the training program as designed, and focusing on the training program that looks at how we have got to respond to the challenge of the day as the South African Police Service, but also largely the question of policing within the democratic context. So I think for me that question that you are raising is a question that is relevant for further sort of discussion and debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The time allocated for questions has expired. Outstanding replies received will be printed in Hansard. We now come to notices of motion. Does any member wish to give notice of a motion? Yes, Honourable Member.
I hereby move on behalf of the ANC that in the next sitting, the House debates ways to expand access to primary healthcare services to benefit and improve the health status of our people in the urban and rural areas. I so move. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Next person with a notice for motion. Yes, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I hereby move on behalf of the ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates promoting the good governance, democracy, human rights, justice, and the rule of law in African continent. I thank you.
Thank you. Next. Member. Notice of a motion. Yes, Honourable Member.
I hereby move on behalf of the African National Congress that in its next sitting, the House debates building a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. I so move.
Thank you. Next notice. Yes, Honourable Member.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I give notice that I shall move at the next sitting of this House, that this House, noting the serious allegations of the close ties between the Gupta family and President Zuma, establish an ad hoc committee to investigate the alleged involvement of the Gupta family in the capture of state resources and undue influence over the executive, with the following terms of reference for the investigation. A, that during the inquiry, specific attention is paid to 1, the circumstances surrounding the purchase of the Optimum coal mine by the Gupta-owned Tagata Exploration and the subsequent contract awarded to Takata Exploration by the state parastatal ESCOM. 2, the involvement of members of the Gupta family in the appointment processes of executive member positions, with specific reference to the following allegations. A, the acknowledgement of Ms. Faiki Mentor that the Gupta family offered her the position of Minister of Public Enterprises. B, the allegations that the Gupta family informed Mr. Fikile Mbalula of his appointment to the position of Minister of Sports and Recreation prior to his actual appointment to the position. C, the acknowledgement of Mr. Msebisi Jonas that the position of Minister of Finance was offered to him by members of the Gupta family. And D, the allegations that the Gupta family was involved in the appointment of Mr. David van Rooyen to the position of Minister of Finance. 3, the claims that 2 Gupta-aligned advisors, Mr. Mohammed Bobat and Mr. Ian Whitley, were appointed to top-level positions alongside Mr. David van Rooyen, both when he started at National Treasury and when he subsequently moved to the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. And 4, the undue influence on decisions regarding government advertising, spending, and subsequent departmental decisions to channel advertisements to the Gupta-owned New Age newspaper. B, that it proposed measures in line of the Assembly's oversight function that could prevent similar incidents from occurring in future appointments, that it consists of 11 members as follows: ANC 6, DA 3, EAFF 1, and other parties 1, that it exercises the powers in Rule 138 as it may deem necessary for the performance of its task, and that it reports to the Assembly by no later than 9 September 2016. I so move, and the documentation on substantiation is with it.
Take notice. Yes, Honourable Member at the back.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Chief Whip. On behalf of the ANC, that in its next sitting, the House debates accelerating the creation of opportunities in infrastructure, projects for young graduates, apprentices, and experiential learners. I so move.
Further notice. Yes, Honourable Kongo.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I hereby move on behalf of the United Democratic Movement that at its next sitting, the House debates the powers of the Financial Services Board and the negative effect this has on the financial services industry. I so move.
Thank you. Next notice. We now move to motions without notice. Honourable Hoop.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Chairperson. The
No,
African
Honourable
National
Member, speak to that thing.
What did you say? Sorry, Honourable Deputy Speaker. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House 1 congratulate Baraka Football Club for being promoted to the Premier Soccer League after a 1-1 draw against Malana United at the Peter Macabre Stadium on Sunday afternoon, 22nd May 2016. 2 notes that from the onset, Baraka played impressive football and has simultaneously upset big Premier Soccer League clubs in the Nedbank competition. 3 recognizes that this promotion has made the people of Mpashlele and surrounding villages in Limpopo, where Baraka comes from, proud, knowing that they have a club in the PSL. 4 further recognizes that the promotion will also offer young people from those villages role models to emulate and hope for the higher future. And 5 wishes Baraka FC more success in the highly contested Premier Soccer League. I so move. Thank you.
Are there any, what's this now? If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. Yes, Honourable Member at the back there.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move on behalf of the NFP that this August House notes that members of the South African Police Service in Durban has discovered a drug manufacturing laboratory in Chatsworth where a new type of drug has been manufactured. 2, further notes that 3 men aged between 27 and 39 were arrested in Chatsworth drug bust and charged with possession of drugs. And finally notes that the new type of drug includes cannabis, pseudopredine, alcohol, gelatin, sugar, and citric acid, which is cooked together and molded to resemble the popular sweets called jelly babies. Wherefore, we call upon this House to congratulate the members of the SAPS in Durban for their vigilant and dedicated to combating the manufacturing and trade-in of drugs. Encourage all members of the SAPS nationwide to intensify all efforts to combat the scourge of drugs, which is destroying the social fabric of South Africa. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. Next, notice of a motion without, go ahead, honourable member.
Chairperson, the African National Congress moved without notice that the House congratulate Mamelodi Sundowns for being 2015-2016 ABSA Premier League champions. Notes that this is after they beat Platinum Stars 1-0 on their final league match on Saturday, 21st May 2016. Further notes that Mamelodi Sundowns has also set a new ABSA Premiership record by reaching 71 points and 22 wins in 30 games. It realizes that they have not only broken their own record points, but also previous 16-team league records of 69 points, which was set by Kaizer Chiefs last season, and wishes Sundowns more success in their coming season. As Gamnaga, so move.
There are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. Next motion. Honourable members, that deals with the motions without notice. The Secretary will read the first order of the day.
Consideration of request for approval by Parliament of draft regulations on levies and fees pertaining to the Community Schemes Ombud Service made in terms of Section 29(1)(b), C, D, and E of the Community Schemes Ombud Service Act 2011, Act number 9 of 2011.
Are there any objections to the approval by Parliament of the draft regulations on levies and fees pertaining to the Community Service Schemes Ombud Service? No objections, agreed to. The Secretary will read the last order of the day.
Debate on Africa Day, building a better Africa and a better world.
The Honorable Deputy Minister of Energy, Mata. Hope you have the right speech, madam.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Ministers, Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members, guests, and fellow South Africans. The project of building a better Africa and a better world began formally 53 years ago with the birth of the Organization of African Unity. Allow me, therefore, to take us and remind us of this epic journey very briefly. On the 25th May 1963, 32 independent African states gathered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to establish the OAU. As other nations gained their independence, they swelled the ranks of the OAU till it reached 53 at the time of the African Union that was born in 2002. South Sudan became the newest member of the African Union at number 54 in July 2011. The main objective of this continental body was to promote unity, solidarity, and the independence of all African states. This included coordinating and intensifying cooperation and efforts to achieve a better life for the peoples of Africa, to safeguard their sovereignty and territorial integrity, and to rid the continent of colonialism and apartheid. The OAU at that point was the only continental body in what was called the post-colonial Third World. It made sure that Africa's voice was heard in the international arena, and its unity was its strength. Leaders and giants of liberation struggles such as President Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia, worked tirelessly to ensure, as far as possible, peaceful resolution of conflicts within and outside the liberation movements. Their skill and commitment was tested to the limit with the assassination of Eduardo Mondlane, the leader of Frelimo, that caused a leadership crisis. Their wisdom and patience enabled the freedom fighters to regroup and move forward. They ensured that none of the liberation movements, irrespective of the crises and challenges, ever lost sight of the ultimate goal, the liberation of their people. These two leaders in particular kept the African flag flying high and were worthy representatives of the departed African giants. Upen Bella was Algeria, Unasa of Egypt, Nkrumah of Ghana, Toure of Guinea, to name but a few. It was at the same constitutive conference of the OAU that the Liberation Committee was set up, to be headquartered in Dar es Salaam at the invitation of Mwalimu, President of Tanzania. Its role was to mobilize financial and material resources, logistics support, arms, training, and publicity for the liberation movements that were officially recognized by the OAU. We continue to salute Comrade Malumu, the freedom fighter, a great son of the continent. Once we achieved our liberation, the OAU Liberation Committee was dissolved in June 1994 in Tunis. On this occasion, Mwalimu said, and I quote, "The founding fathers of the Organization of African Unity set themselves two objectives: the total liberation of Africa from colonialism and racial minority rule on one hand, and Africa's unity on the other. The importance that they attach to the first objective can be judged from the fact that the establishment of the Liberation Committee of the OAU was decided at that inaugural meeting. Our role as a democratic government led by the ANC is to continue this proud legacy of anti-imperialism and international solidarity. South Africa has played an important role in conflict management and resolution in Lesotho, in the DRC, from the time of Mobutu, through the inter-Congolese dialogue that we hosted, as well as play a facilitation role in the Burundi crisis. We have taken our role of peacekeeping very seriously, as evidenced by our troop presence in South Sudan, Central African Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, DRC, as well as Burundi at different times in the recent past. I stand here today as a beneficiary of international solidarity and the African progressive movement. It feels good to be African. Throughout the 1990s, African leaders debated the need to amend the OAU structures to reflect the challenges of changing world conditions. The OAU Sirte Declaration of '99 called for the establishment of the African Union. The African Union was to build on the work of the OAU and accelerate the process of Africa's integration as it sought to support efforts to fully integrate the continent into the global economy and address the myriad social, economic, and political challenges of the member states. The subsequent 3 summits laid the ground for the formal launch of the AU in 2002 in Durban. The contact group of frontline states was constituted in the 1990s, comprised Angola, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Zambia, as well as Nigeria, which insisted that it wanted to participate and was given observer status. This was at the height of the apartheid regime's desperation for survival. That was conducting undeclared war on neighboring states in violation of all international laws. Both sides declared that there would be no independence for Namibia as long as there was any danger of SWAPO election victory. Siyazi ukwenza again. The conceptualization of the Harare Declaration began in 1989, led by O.R. Tambo, who, because of his political astuteness and extraordinary capacity for strategic thinking and analysis, had begun to read the signs of the end of the Cold War, aptly depicted by the collapse of the Soviet Union. He had been observing and following developments on both sides of the Berlin Wall and correctly predicted that there would be a shift in international relations and focus, and that there would emerge an international consensus towards peaceful resolution of regional conflicts. He then asked a team of young cadres, Neo Mukangwa, Joel Nechitenze, Frini Jinwala, Nwako Ramotlodi, just to name a few, to put together a discussion document, which they did, which was then approved by the African National Congress and went on. And they went on to take this document, which was approved by the contact group, the Frontline States Contact Group, who were meeting in Harare. That is how the Harare Declaration was born. It outlined what were the basic minimum tenets for any negotiation with the racist regime. And these were the immediate release of all political prisoners, the unbanning of all political organizations and people's organizations, free and safe return of all those in exile, free political activity, and a commitment to building a united, free, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South Africa. The contact group then took this to the OAU, which then instructed that it should go to the United Nations. It was duly adopted and renamed on the way forward to a united, non-racist, and democratic South Africa. The Harare Declaration was a very critical document as it reaffirmed the commitment of the ANC, of the continent, and of the world to the goal of a free, democratic, and prosperous South Africa that would take its rightful place among the nations, among the community of nations. It was therefore critical that during formal negotiations in South Africa, all efforts that sought to enshrine minority rights were defeated in CODESA. However, the ANC sought to reassure any peace-loving Democrats through the adoption of certain concessions for a limited period as a gesture of goodwill. It is what we refer to as the sunset clause. We are the architects and the midwives of this democracy, and we will defend it with whatever we can. In 1957, let me take you back, on his return from a year of studying in Colombia and the US, Professor Z.K. Matthews came back convinced that we needed to mobilize to isolate this racist regime from the world community. This call was then taken up by President Albert Lutuli, who repeated his call to the international community during his acceptance speech of the Nobel Peace Prize. This also became the clarion call and an important pillar of our struggle. President O.R. Tambo then tabled a resolution at the United Nations after receiving blessings from our continental body. It was by no means an easy feat, as there were many who tried to stop this forward march to the liberation of our people. With the support of the OAU, OR took this to the UN. Dumanokwe carried the torch forward at the UN and passed on the baton to Johnny McCartney, who played a critical and pivotal role in lobbying and mobilizing the people of the US and pressurizing the US government to adopt and enact sanctions against Pretoria. Once that was done, the others followed. That is how we got the expulsion of the racist regime and sanctions adopted. Many efforts, including that of President Kenneth Kaunda, who on behalf of the OAU went to the Nordic countries, resulting in the Oslo Conference Against Apartheid in 1972, that had a major impact in Europe and ensured that the support for the liberation struggle and the anti-apartheid movement grew in leaps and bounds. Liberation was unstoppable. All the above can only point us to the challenge of today and tomorrow. The African Union is focused on the twin goals of peace and prosperity through economic integration of its member states. The world is increasingly integrating, global economy is on a slowdown, democracy in the emerging world is facing sustainability challenges. The question, therefore, is what does this mean for Africa? What kind of leadership is required to navigate the challenges of the moment? I would like to submit that Africa needs to invest more in ensuring that democracy is sustained, that Africa remains united, particularly in multilateral fora. Most of the fastest growing economies are in Africa, and Africa needs to take advantage of its natural and human resources to give effect to the Africa rising notion. All of us here, elected representatives of the people, need to rise to these challenges. Key to our work is to ensure continued and sustainable infrastructure investment across the continent to achieve both regional and continental integration for increased intra-Africa trade. We must take advantage of bodies like BRICS. Honorable Speaker, too many people and too many nations have sacrificed for us to sit back in the face of growing incidents of xenophobic violence and intimidation. We are witnessing an upsurge in overt racism. As a woman who has lived the reality of triple oppression, I am completely appalled at the total lack of sensitivity and empathy for the suffering of the vast majority of our people. It is clear that the centuries-old yoke of colonialism and apartheid cannot be overcome in 22 years. The real legacy of apartheid's special construct ensures that the unacceptably large numbers of Black people face continued exclusion from the mainstream economy, continued marginalization, and lack of access to opportunities as they live far from the centers of commerce, economic activity, and development. The totally insensitive utterances of members here who have never had to pay any reparations and instead feel a sense of entitlement is actually quite hurtful. You'll be well advised to listen to Umazibuko Lohambileyo. Let us all put hands to the will and build a truly united South Africa.
Your time has expired.
Forward to 2063. Siyakuba.
Honorable Mukhalapa.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Today marks the 53rd anniversary of the formation of the African Union. We salute the founding fathers and forebearers of this august institution and the principles and values for what it was intended to do in the African continent. Since the establishment of this organization, some noticeable progress and success have been achieved, including the fact that Africa is part of the 7 fastest growing economies in the world. Most renowned Longueville rouleurs, great thinkers and writers, leaders and sportsmen are in Africa. The aspirations of Africans to access basic services of telecommunications, water, electricity, health, and education is progressively realized. Much work still needs to be done. Mr. Speaker, the youth bulge, which is a source of human capital in the continents, provide hope for the future of this great continent. The right to self-determination, political and economic freedom, sovereignty, independence, and development are the key values of the founding values of the African Union. Agenda 2063 envisages a paradigm shift to ensure, amongst others, an inclusive growth, sustainable development, integrated continent, good governance, democracy, human rights, justice, and rule of law, peaceful and secure Africa. These are noble, bold intentions. However, they would not happen on its own, and it's not an overnight work. It's work in progress that needs bold, innovative, new thinking, and visionary leadership that is not held back by old imperial, colonial, and slavery thinking, but focused on the 22nd century and building progress for the future generation. The African Peer Review Mechanism and the NAPAD programs, founded 13 years ago, gives hopes to the awakening of Africa's potential by ensuring that African states monitor each other and learn from each other's best practice through innovative governance, assessment, and promotion tools, and gives recommendations to stimulate growth. This initiative stimulates economic, social, political, and cooperative governance. However, the challenge to this noble program is member states' reluctance to voluntarily participate in the review process. Only 17 members of the 35 has been assessed. Chairperson, however, let me highlight some of the failures and challenges facing Africa and adversely affecting the progress of its people. These include the fact that Africa still has the longest-serving dictators who do not want to pass on power, who continue to act with impunity and oppress its people. Human rights abuses are still prevalent, highest level of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, diseases and sickness. Civil wars, genocide, political intolerance, and homophobia are the order of the day in Africa, which is against the spirit of the establishment of the AU. Chairperson, the continued persecution, harassment, and arrest of opposition leaders is shameful and must be challenged. Democracy, freedom of thought and expression, as well as media freedom, should be championed according to the principles and values espoused in the African Charter of Democracy, Elections, and Good Governance. The cancer that is enraging the continent is the third termism and illegal amendments of constitutions to allow leaders to stay in power against the popular will, as we've seen in Burundi and Rwanda and the DRC. Together with unconstitutional changes of power and rigging of elections, this has led to political and civil violence that leaves many women and children displaced and vulnerable, and robbing Africa of its future. Chairperson, on trade side, Africa is lagging behind in intra-Africa trade. There is trade deficit. Infrastructure, red tape, and protocols still remain the main obstacles to unlock trade potential. The AU needs to stand firm on its principles and values by ensuring that human rights abuses must not go unaccounted for and prosecuted. The call by the AU to encourage its members to withdraw from the ICC is ill-advised. The ICC is the only institution that can offer justice for many Africans who seek justice for human rights atrocities, tortures, displacement, and killings. The African Court of Justice has been a disappointment, together with the AU Human Rights Commission, which has failed to act independently and are always subjected to political pressure. Just like the disbandment of the SADC Tribunal Court, which was shut down because Robert Mugabe did not like it as it ruled against him. The AU resolution to absolve the head of states and senior officials from prosecution for human rights abuses is an indictment on the AU principles and values of equality before the law and the rule of law. Chairperson, the AU has let down the people of Burundi by not approving the deployment of 5,000 peacekeeping mission to Burundi merely because the Burundian government objected. What about the UN responsibility to protect principle? While innocent civilians are killed and displaced by government forces, allowing military and human rights observers is not enough to ensure safety of the civilians. The AU further let the Sudanese people down by rolling the red carpet to a wanted war criminal and fugitive of law, al-Bashir, to the AU meetings. Shame on the AU member state collective, who are protecting one man at the expense of 2.5 million women and children who are displaced and 300,000 killed by his government. In conclusion, Chairperson, there is hope for Africa, and that hope is in its young lions, who are the majority, who are starting to reject liberation movements, who has lost ideas and are trapped on colonial, imperial, and slavery mentality. We need new, fresh ideas to take the continent forward. These young lions are encouraged by the liberal principles and values of freedom, democracy, individual rights, human rights, free market economy, rule of law, equality before the law, freedom of expression and belief and association. The African Liberal Network, which has grown to 47 members parties in over 30 African countries, is taking over governments in Africa, ensuring that we bring liberal governments. Above all, there is hope that Africa will rise again to its destiny of revival. I thank you.
Siyabonga, siyomema manje umhlonishwa Msimang.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Today, we mark the birth of the Organization of African Unity, born to facilitate solidarity and stability on our continent and to celebrate our shared achievements. When we speak of building a better Africa, it is right that we also say, and a better world. For the African continent is neither isolated or insulated, and what we do here has an impact in the global village. This became evident in the last century with the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize to Nkosi Albert Luthuli. He was a son of Africa, yet his ideas were recognized throughout the world. It is fitting that Africa celebrates its own, and the OAU did so by bestowing posthumous award on Nkosi Luthuli through King Moshoeshoe II. Prince Buthelezi accompanied Nokukhanya Luthuli to Lesotho, where he spoke on behalf of the entire liberation movement. Prince Buthelezi is one of those giants who has championed the interests of Africa throughout the world while remaining a leader on African soil. Like many of the greatest African leaders of his generation, his political ideas were forged at the University of Fort Hare. On Africa Day 2016, the centennial celebration of Fort Hare must take center stage. From these universities, leaders emerged that would shape the African continent. 5 African heads of state graduated from Fort Hare, their political conscience galvanized towards the liberation of Africa, both politically and economically. Thus, South Africa became one of the centers of a continental liberation struggle. We should be proud of this heritage, knowing that the ideas of freedom and democracy were ignited on our soil and spread throughout our continent. It began on a university campus and took hold across Africa. In sharp contrast, we cannot help but acknowledge the seeds being sown on the university campuses of our country today. These are not seeds of revolution, but seeds of anarchy. Social justice is not born in the destruction of property and the disrupting of learning. tragically, we are not witnessing the beginning of a new wave of liberation, but what we are seeing is a generation fighting with wrong tools to achieve what can only be achieved through knowledge, education, and mentoring, I think.
Sithokoze. Mhlonishwa Shaiki, ma'am.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I sometimes wish the Minister of Sports and Recreation would be here so he can teach my colleagues how to play the ball, not the man. Honorable Chairperson, today we celebrate the founding of the Organization of African Unity on the 25th of May, 1963, the front runner of the current African Union. On this day, leaders of 30 of the 32 countries in Africa which had gained independence gathered in Addis Ababa to sign the founding charter giving birth to the ideal of a united Pan-Africa. I'm not surprised with the noise you're making. You've been exposed in this house for your fraud, for your corruption, your lack of service delivery, been exposed here. Today, firstly, political unity will require an Africa without artificial borders which have been imposed by colonial powers during the partition of Africa. At the heart of political unity will be the absolute requirement of democracy where the will of the people will be expressed within a culture of human rights. Secondly, economic unity will also be of great importance, and the National Freedom Party believes that a single currency should be considered in the long term to facilitate continental trade. Africa is also rich in natural resources, but they are currently exported as raw materials to other continents for refinement. In an economically united Africa, these raw materials should be transformed into commodities to boost continental trade and industrial development. Thirdly, social unity in Africa will be found in its rich tapestry of human diversity. A better Africa will become great because of its people bound together by the ancient thread of Ubuntu, which emphasizes the interdependent relationship we have as individuals. Most importantly, Africa united socially will unlock the caring nature of collectivism as opposed to the highly individualistic ethos currently dominating social life, and the world certainly needs more care. Chairperson, for African problems, we need African solutions. We need to reach out to our fellow Africans and resolve our differences through dialogue and cooperation rather than confrontation and conflict. Ours is a forgiving continent. Honorable Chairperson, let us not allow imperialists to divide and rule us Africans and loot all our valuable resources. A lot of the unrest and civil unrest in many countries are caused by imperialists and other Western countries that are after our resources. Finally, Chairperson, a better Africa will contribute to a better world, for we have much to offer. In unity, we can steer Africa to greatness, and we can use our immense wealth of natural resources to bring prosperity to the people of our continent. Through political unity, we will restore the dignity of the African, which have been destroyed by colonialism, and socially will unlock the human potential of all Africans. Thank you.
Sithokozeke kwanele. Siyabonga. Mhlonishwa.
Honorable member, don't do that. House Chair and honorable members, on May 25, 1963, in a summit conference for African heads of states in Addis Ababa, Haile Selassie I said, and I quote, "We remain persuaded that in our efforts to scatter the clouds which rim the horizon of our future, success must come if only because failure is unthinkable," end quote. This period was characterized by a wave of enthusiasm as the rebirth of Africa as a free continent was well underway. Borrowing the words of Pixlika Seme from his 1906 Regeneration of Africa speech, this was a period, and I quote, when Africans set their pride in their own race and ability over and against a hostile public opinion, end quote. Motivated by the African humanist philosophy of Ubuntu, which according to Kenyan theologian John Beatty means, I am because we are, and since we are,
therefore I am. Africans knew that their freedom was incomplete without the total liberation of other Africans. Nowhere is this more succinctly captured than in the words of Haile Selassie from the same speech again when he says, and I quote, "Our political and economic liberty will be devoid of meaning for so long as the degrading spectacle of South Africa's apartheid continues to haunt our waking hours and to trouble our sleep," end quote. Fellow South Africans, please grant me atonement for putting you to sleep with what appears to be a succession of boring quotes. However, the underlying message here is that during our time of need, South Africa was Africa's business. We dare not now turn our backs on Africa in their hour of need. Therefore, Africa and its challenges is our business. Let me also hasten to add that much has been achieved since the establishment of the AU in 1963. However, in a sad irony of history, the midwives of the rebirth of Africa, like crocodiles eating their young, once in power, turned on their own people and decided to be the worst oppressors than their former colonial masters. Most African governments have hardened into autocracy and often go out of their way to subvert checks and balances that seek to ensure governments are unaccountable and that democracy fails. The question is, how can we get past these challenges and build a better Africa? In line with Africa Vision 2063, we have to build an Africa of good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law. We have to embark on a people-centric development that heeds the wise words of Darren A. Smogli and James A. Robin in their book, Why Nations Fail, when they say, and I quote, "Building inclusive institutions that will translate into meaningful change will only occur when a broad segment of society, the youth in particular, mobilizes and organizes in order to effect political change and does so not for narrow sectarian interests or to take control of extractive institutions, but to transform extractive institutions into more inclusive ones for the benefit of all." I thank you.
Sithokoze. Agbaralet Mulder.
Chairperson, the question today, are we building a better Africa? We achieved successes and failures. In 2015, the Euromonitors found that 5 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world was in sub-Saharan Africa. The region as a whole achieved the 2nd fastest rate of growth behind Asia. Surely that is success and positive. But weak infrastructure, electricity shortages, etc., is some of Africa's challenges. One example, in Ethiopia, one of Africa's largest and most dynamic economies, only 34% of the roads are paved. Now, sir, let's stop blaming a colonial past for all these problems. Most African colonies became independent more than 50 years ago. If you want to blame the past, first compare these African countries with colonies in Asia that became independent at the same time and are doing much better at the moment. Then you realize that bad decisions, unrealistic economy policies, corrupt leaders, and internal strife in Africa caused many of these problems. Take Liberia for an example. It was founded in 1847, 169 years ago, and not as a colony. Gestig deur vrywordende Amerikaanse slawe. Hoewel hulle nooit gekoloniseer was nie, is daar vandag steeds groot armoede en is hulle getuister met etniese geweld en konflik. Al Afrika's probleme kan nie net op kolonisasie en aan sogenaamde onderdrukking geblameer word nie. As ek van suksesse en mislukkings in Afrika praat, is hier lede in die raad wat sê as Afrikaner is ek nie deel van Afrika nie. Ek mag nie van ons suksesse en ons mislukkings praat nie. Hoe kortsigtig? Asof hulle kan besluit of ek my as deel van Afrika sien. As Afrika of Suid-Afrika tot niet gaan, dan raak dit my en my kleinkinders soos almal ander hierso teenwoordig. Ek het nie 'n tweede adres nie en my taal word net hier gepraat. Hulle aanvaar die Arabiere in die noorde van Afrika, maar die Afrikaners in die suide van Afrika nie. Tijdens my besoeke aan Afrika-lande as adjunkt minister destyds, was altyd groot waardering vir ons boere se kennis en se produksievermoë. Waar Afrika die wêreld se natuurlike kosmandjie behoort te wees, word die vasteland se landpotensiaal tans vermors. Van die 48 lande in Afrika suid van die Sahara was 35 teen 2000 netto invoerders van kos. Afrika se aandeel in die wêreld uitvoer van kos het sedert die 70 gehalveer. Op hierdie tydstip is daar 26 Afrika state wat amptelik vra, ek is getuie daarvan, of daar nie landbouers of boere van Suid-Afrika is wat by hulle kan kom boer om te help nie. In Afrika word hulle kennis en hulle word waardeer, maar in Suid-Afrika vir kortstondige politieke redes word hulle beskuldig. Ek sê dis in belang van Afrika dat hierdie potensiaal benut word en dat almal wat kan, ons almal saam, ook die Afrikaner boere, toegelaat word om 'n bydrae te maak. In that way, we all together can build a better Africa. I thank you.
Dank je. Achtbare lid Dakle.
Thank you, Chair. With Africa Day on our minds and the topic of building a better Africa and a better world before us, three things come to my mind: extremism, political unrest, and trade. Interestingly, according to NGOs working on the ground in Africa and across the world, there is often a connection between high restrictions on freedom of religion and belief in a society and high levels of violent conflict and military spending, poor economic development, a slow status and participation of women in social and economic matters, and poor health are also generally evident. The ACDP deplores the impact of extremism across the globe and in Africa, where terror groups like Boko Haram burn down towns and abduct and kill with no constraints. No country in the world, including Africa, can afford to be complacent regarding the need to diligently protect freedom of religion and belief, or the need to deal decisively with violent extremists and terrorism. It is true that migratory movements in Africa have become more complex in recent years, and South Africa, which is a preferred destination for various categories of migrants and refugees, has been recorded as receiving one of the highest number of asylum seekers since 2008. This is placing a huge burden on South Africa, as asylum seekers and refugees have freedom of movement, can study, work in the country, and are in addition able to access a range of social services. Large numbers of economic migrants under the guise of refugees lodge asylum applications, clogging an already overburdened system. Irregular migration is largely impacting on the country's economically depressed communities, which are affected by escalating rates of unemployment. Irregular migrants settle in these communities, creating real and perceived competition for scarce resources, resulting in tension between host communities and non-nationals. Now, the ACDP is of the view that addressing the causes of migration remains central in the current migrant crisis at home and worldwide. In Africa, for example, underdevelopment contributes greatly to migration. The Common African Position on Migration acknowledges that poor socioeconomic conditions, such as a lack of job opportunities, high unemployment, poverty, lack of investment in sustainable development, political instability, and armed conflict all stimulate migration. The ACDP believes that increased investment in Africa from countries in the north, with a view to stimulating the economies of Africa, could help reduce south-north migration, as significant numbers from Africa head north daily in an attempt to leave the continent. The benefit to other parts of the world, and the EU in particular, should be obvious. 1.8 billion euros have been budgeted by the EU to assist with migration issues in Africa, while 6 billion euros have been budgeted for migration issues in Turkey. South African members of parliament recently appealed to EU counterparts to seriously consider the benefits to Europe of an increased budget for Africa, and I will post the rest that I have to say. Thank you.
Isikhulumi esilandelayo umhlonishwa Tom.
Nqanga nentsiba zayo asikwazi xa sikhumbula olusuku ukungajongi emva apho sisuka khona. Ngalo lonke ixesha ndisima phansi, ndisima kule ndawo ndime kuyo, ndiyibona ibalulekile into yoba ingakumbi abantu abatsha bayazi apho sisuka khona Kuba ukuba akuyazi apho usuka khona, akusoze uyazi apho uya khona. Mabayiqonde kakuhle into yokuba into eyenzeke izolo, ukuba ayithethwa isenophinda yenzeke ngomso. Umhlaba weAfrika wacandwa ngabacinezeli. Bawucanda ngokwentlantlu zabo, ngokuthanda kwabo, nangeelwimi zabo. Sisohlulwa ngokuba ngama-French, sikwilizwe eliphethwe ngama-French siseAfrika, ngamaPhuthukezi, ngamaNgesi, nangabanye abantu. Oko ke kwenza umbhodamo kwiAfrika ngokubanzi. Kwaqhuma imfazwe, kwakho ukruthwa-kruthwano, ngenxa yokunyoluka koongqondogqwirha, benyolukele uqoqosho lwelizwe laseAfrika. Kulapho ke kwavela umbutho weAfrika emanyeneyo, i-Organization of African Unity, eye emva kwexesha yabizwa ngokuba lumbimbi lweAfrika, African Union. Ngolu suku lwanamhlanje lwama-25 kwinyanga kaCanzibe, wazalwa umbono ophuhlileyo wokuba mayibuye inkcubeko yeAfrika. Umbono weAfrika womnyaka wama-2063, Vision 2063, ingakumbi kumnqweno wesihlanu, Aspiration 5, uyayicacisa phandle into yokuba asinakuze sifezekise nto singakhange sigxininise kwinkcubeko yethu, sigxininise kubuthina bethu, kumagugu namafa ethu, nakwiziseko ezikhokhelela kwindlela yokuziphatha nakwindlela esiphila ngayo ubomi bethu. Kulonto ke kufaneleke ukuba sazi into yokuba umntu ubekwa phambili. Kwinkcubeko yaseAfrika kubaluleke umntu ngaphezu kwayo yonke into. Enye nenye into ilandela emva komntu. Kulonto yokubaluleka kwakhe umntu, akabi ngumthuzimele, koko uba yinxalenye yemizamo eyenziwa luluntu ngokubanzi. Asibonisile ke amazwe aseAfrika kule nto ngexesha lobandlululo. Amaxhoba engcinezelo eMzantsi Afrika awele imida ebunzimeni esiya kumazwe aseAfrika, besiya kulwela inkululeko yethu sonke sikule ndlu. Bawele oTele Bridge, bengena eLesotho, bephantsi koxinzelelo olungummangaliso, abacinezeli befutha phezu kwabo. Bawele eRamatlabhama, bengena eBotswana, umbuso womcinezeli uhleli kubo entanyeni. Amazwe aseAfrika anjengo-Angola, ngoMozambique, Tanzania, iZambia, nazo zadlala indima enkulu ngokuqonda ukuba inkululeko yabo ayiphelelanga xa uMzantsi Afrika ungekakhululeki. Isembindini ke lento kwinkcubeko yaseAfrika intoba umntu ngumntu ngabantu. Kodwa ke sihlalo obekekileyo, la mazwe ahlawule ixabiso eliphezulu kakhulu. Into yakuba basikhongozele xa sisuka eMzantsi Afrika idale umnyele kubacinezeli, bahlasela, baqhushumbisa kwiindawo ezihlala abantu. Loo nto yenza iziva nezivubeko ezisemzimbeni nezisemphefumlweni, kanti noqoqosho lwalamazwe khange lusinde. Ubugcisa yinto ephambili eAfrika. Ukuba umntu akazalwanga nayo, uzalelwa kuyo. Mandicaphule nje sihlalo, indima edlalwa ngumculo apha kubugcisa bethu empilweni yomAfrika. Thina ma-Afrika xa silusizi siyacula. Kuba umculo usebenza njengechiza lokunyanga izivubeko esinazo emphefumlweni. Xa sivuya siyacula. Kuba uvuyo lwethu sifuna ukuba sabelane nalo nabanye abantu. Xa sisiya emfazweni okanye edabini siyagwaba. Ngokwenza oko ke sintlatatha amadolo kumagwala, sifaka ivuso kumakhalipha. Uyibeka kakuhle lento uSteve Biko kwincwadi yakhe ethi I Write What I Like. Ndimcaphule. The major thing to note about our songs is that they never were songs of individuals. African songs are group songs. Though many have words, this is not the important thing about them. These were adapted to suit the occasion and had the wonderful effect of making everybody read the same things from the common experience. Yiba nombono wabantu besebenza nzima ecani kwendlela bephethe ipeki okokusile bebetha besebenza. Ingoma iwuthatha lo msebenzi unzima kangaka iwenze ube lula. Sinjalo ke thina ma-Afrika. Umongameli kwintetho yakhe yobume besizwe ukhuthazile ukuba kuculwe umhobe wombimbi lweAfrika. Siliqhobela izandla isebe lobugcisa nenkcubeko ngokunika izikolo ushicilelo lomhobe ne-flags ngokunjalo. Honorable Chairperson, it is important that Pan-African ideals are fully embedded in all school curricula, and Pan-African cultural assets like heritage, folklore, languages, film, music, theater, literature, festivals are enhanced. Chairperson, culture, heritage, and common identity and destiny must be the center of all our strategies so as to facilitate a Pan-African approach and the African Renaissance. Xa ndigqibezela, mandicaphule kulo mhobe womanyano yeAfrika. Baralibaradi ba-Afrika, namayalitsatsi, linamayalihumati, lihudima, hari bukeng Afrika, sikate sebuphelo. Ndiyathanda ukuthi enkosi kakhulu i-African National Congress ithi masihlale siyazi indima yethu njengama-Afrika. Kunjalo nje imbali yethu masingayeki ukuyithetha kuba kwabanye abantu iyalumeza ukuva amasikizi abawenzileyo ebantwini bakuthi base-Afrika. I-Afrika mayiwathethe lamabali, i-Afrika iqulunqe indlela eya phambili. Ndiyabulela.
Siyabulela mhlonishwa. Mchabiseki Nchaisa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. This day has been given a theme of, I quote, the year of human rights, then women in particular. So in celebrating this day, we should therefore remember and sympathize with the parents of the girls that were kidnapped by the notorious Boko Haram in Nigeria, the country that is #1 in economy in Africa. We still wonder why the President Muhammad Buhari is still unable to fight this dangerous group so that these young women may return home safe. It is in women that we should invest. Therefore, Africa cannot allow a situation of this nature where women will be kidnapped. As Africans, we should come together and fight the social and economic evils so that we promote economy in our country, rather in our continent. It is when we are together that we can realize the vision of silencing guns by 2020 and put an end to the civil wars in our countries, African countries, because we want peace in Africa. However, it should start with the African leaders to be exemplary and bring peace to the continent. It is time now for other leaders to step down, not to hold on to power, as in the case of a bulldog tenacity. They should give up, because once this traditional leader, this president hold on to power for a long period, it is then that there will be no peace, because there will be challenge. So we call upon those leaders now, at least to call it a day and give chance to others. We should fight for the economic growth of Africa so that all gains would be shared amongst all people. Then the challenge of unemployment, inequality, poverty will be fought, because it is not only affecting South Africa, but Africa as a whole. It is important, therefore, that Africans should support one another. Again, Chairperson, we should learn as Africans to respect the other people's culture in their diversity and their human rights. African leaders should learn to observe the rule of law so that now there should be peace in our continent. Of course, we don't want these civil wars and the destruction of property, because that puts our country or continent in a very bad state of affairs. Coming to African languages, we say charity begins at home. We cannot start by introducing the language that is from overseas. Okay, 30 seconds. Huh?
13
Then
seconds beyond your time. That is why it's in red, Babunchaisa.
Is it? Okay.
Ngiyaxolisa nangabe ungayiboni. Mhlonishwa Mabinda.
Soleto, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. We are here today to commemorate the Africa Day. This day still speaks to the fact that there is still oppression of African people worldwide. It is 53 years since Ghana became the first African nations to gain majority rule and replaced a white-led regime with an African rule. And more than 22 years after Azania supposedly defeated apartheid. Despite the length of time, we find ourselves still commemorating Africa Day. Much, if not all, of what we call independent African countries is nothing but a facade, a window dressing exercise, yes, only but a scam pulled by neo-colonialists, designed to blind and fool the people. You will remember that there was a scramble for Africa in 1884 during the Berlin Conference. Even today, Africa is still a happy hunting ground for the imperialists. But that as it may, my Africa, it is not all doom and gloom. We have a great future ahead of us, for as long as, of course, that future is informed and guided by the principle and values of Pan-Africanism. The same Pan-Africanism which informed the ideology and the realities of Mangaliso Sobukwe, one of the founder members of the PAC, the Honorable Marcus Garvey, Ngwame Nkrumah, Thomas Sankara, Queen Zinga, Queen Many, Patrice Lubumba, to mention few of our heroes and sheroes. Sobukwe said Africa can be organized only under the banner of African nationalism. He went further to say an independence of South Africa is an independence to all Africans, because South Africa is an integral part of the whole continent. As the PAC, we aim politically at government of all of the Africans, by the Africans, for the Africans. with everybody who owes his loyalty to Africa and who is prepared to accept democratic rule of the African majority. Socially, we stand committed to a policy guaranteeing the most equitable distribution of wealth. Socially, we aim at the full development of the human personality and ruthless uprooting, outlawing of all forms and manifestation of racial myth. We want to promote the African values and culture, and we really appreciate, the drastic steps taken by SABC in entrenching 90% local content. Thank you.
Siyabonga. Mchabiseki Koti.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair, comrades and honorable members. Africa Day represents the validation and triumph of Pan-Africanism against the colonial balkanization of Africa. It marks progress over parochial localism. As we celebrate freedom, we honor service, the service of those who fought for Africa, for dignity and the right to call our souls our own. From the leaders of slave revolts in the plantations to the guerrilla fighters against colonial subjugation. Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, Paul Bogle, Dedan Kimati, Josiah Tongogara, Chris Hani, Gerald Nkondlo, Sabelo Palmer. As we celebrate freedom, we must achieve progress. Progress in giving a better life for our people. Release the potential and creativity of our youth. We need peace and security for our mothers. The poverty that is embodied on them be banished. Children must be raised in stable, happy families with enough food and shelter for all. Let the leaders of our continent not betray our dreams. Let the flame of freedom and unity burn eternally in our hearts. Africanism is the only progressive outlook for the development of the Africa of our dreams. William Bladen, Sylvester Williams, W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Oginga Odinga, Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, Haile Selassie, Kambarage Nyerere, Gamal Nasser, Eduardo Mondlane, Patrice Lumumba, Augustino Neto, Ben Bella, Herbert Chitepe, Prixley Kaseme, A.P. Mda, Oliver Tambo, Robert Sobukwe, Peter Aburoko, Zef Mutuping, John Pokela, Amelka Cabral, Captain Thomas Sankara, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, you were there from the beginning till now. You have seen it all. Bob Marley sang, Africa Unite. How good and how pleasant it will be before God and man to see the unification of all Africans. This year we celebrate Africa Day more meaningfully. Haiti will this year become a full member of the African Union. The African slaves revolted and militarily defeated France to declare themselves free in a republic about 212 years ago. The issue of the African diaspora, therefore, moves from theory to reality. We are one and we are uniting. Thank you.
Again, sir. Hlonishwa James.
House Chair, 20th century post-colonial Africa was a continent of pity. Foreign aid was its face, north-south charity its painful heart. Our self-image and our self-confidence were sapped in the 1950s and 1960s by the brutal persistence of a colonial legacy and the obvious inability of most post-colonial governments to break out of it. But deep in our hearts today, we know that there is no point in harping on the evils of colonial history. No point at all. It is over. Governments of Africa are confidently in charge now. By talking about injustice will not bring about justice. War will not become peace, and poverty will not become wealth. Progressive African governments of today have set aside the failed early post-colonial strategies of nationalization, import substitution, industrialization, and economic isolation, set aside by most, that is, except for Zimbabwe, and now proposed perversely by the economic freedom fighters who are additionally in the business of land seizures. Instead, progressive African governments are rebalancing state-economy relations in favor of greater entrepreneurial and creative freedom of its citizens, underwritten by transparent, honest, and supported democratic government. And it is beginning to make a difference. The OECD's African Economic Outlook for 2016 declared that growth remained resilient in 2015 amid a weak global economy, lower commodity prices, adverse weather conditions, and drought in some parts of the most parts of the continent, except at ease for South Africa. Real GDP growth in Africa grew by an average of 3.6% in 2015, higher than the global average of 3.1% and twice that of the Euro area. Africa remained the second fastest growing economy in the world, and several African countries were amongst the world's fastest growing economies, except that is for South Africa. Recent developments in the energy and health area will give further impetus to growth. In energy, Barack Obama's Power Africa program will increase sub-Sahara's electricity generation capacity by 30,000 megawatts, benefit a target of 60 million households by committing 105 billion rands to public-private partnerships across the continent. In health, highlighted by the Ebola outbreak, the African Union, which is a credible body today, despite being run by the very passive Dr. Nkosazana Zuma, has signed an agreement with the US Center for Disease Control to establish an African CDC with 5 coordinating centers linked to an ever-expanding continental-wide infrastructure of public health institutes. With the World Organization efforts and the efforts of Bill Gates and others, billions will go into strengthening Africa's health systems and emergency response to disease outbreaks. Staffing disease control initiatives, Madam Chair, presents a very special opportunity for Africa's medical, health, and bioscience faculties and innovation hubs, most of which are in South Africa. But the Honorable Bladen Zamandi's policies and our stubborn, misguided attachment to Cuba blunts the expansion of our medical schools. Promising is the phenomenal growth of the sub-Saharan pharmaceutical industry, quadrupling in size from 70 billion in 2003 to reach 312 billion by 2013. Oxford Analytica observes, and I quote, "While African economic growth is expected to be slow, bullish estimates suggest that the pharmaceutical sector could grow at around 9.8% annually to 2020 due to market reforms, corporate expansion, and rising healthcare expenditure." Let me say that what has also happened is that Africa's cities has grown, and they have grown as a result of a demographic dividend, and that this puts pressure on African cities in an extraordinary way. So that Lagos will swell from 25 million today to reach 50 million by 2030, surpassing Cairo as Africa's most populous city. Nairobi, and to a lesser extent Johannesburg, are not far behind. Cities will account for 80% of global economic growth, but realizing its benefits will require suitable housing, water and sanitation, electricity, public transport, sustainable urban environments, and good governance. Cities that do well on this front will succeed. That is why leaders who are concerned with successful African cities come to the Cape to see how it is done. Over the last 2 years, the city of Cape Town has received delegations from Madagascar, Burundi, Kenya, Tanzania, Mauritius, Benin, Nigeria, Uganda, and Botswana. That is why thousands more South Africans will vote for us on the 3rd of August, because we know how to run successful governments. And that is why we say to Africa, goodbye pity, hello progress. Let me just say, they do not go to Johannesburg, Swani, or Nelson Mandela Bay to witness success. They go there to see what should not be done. And as for the Zululand municipality, run by the Sheikh Imam, let me say that his little party will be decimated by the 3rd of August.
Mhlonishwa Masango.
Sithokoze Mphathi Nlambo. Honorable House Chairperson, honorable members and fellow South Africans, Nkosi Sikelel Africa. There is undoubtedly no gainsaying that by conceptualizing the African Agenda 2063, the continent has set itself on an irreversible course towards achieving its socio-economic transformation within the next 47 years and beyond. Indeed, honorable members, let us applaud the leadership of the continent for operationalizing the NEPAD in all of its facets. What a masterly vision. In assessing the fortunes of Africa, scholars such as Stephen Radile, Robert Rothbeck, and the former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan said the following. Kofi Annan observed that, I quote, Africa is a continent with tremendous resources, but not more than the talent of its young people. With courage and vision, Africa can ensure a stable, prosperous, and equitable future. The eradication of extreme poverty is a key component of the post-2015 MDG process and the African Union's Agenda 2063.
Order, members.
The goal would see African states reducing extreme poverty to below 10% by 2045 and 3% by 2063. The interventions are amongst the following: social assistance, pro-poor economic growth, education, job creation, etc., etc. But these differ according to the ability of the economy of each of the countries. In 2012, at its 53rd National Conference, the ANC resolved that, I quote, building intra-African trade is a key component, is a key economic policy objective, and is in the vital interest of the people of South Africa and the entire African continent, I quote, unquote. So, foreign direct investment worth billions of rands from, amongst others, China, India, the USA, and the European Union are flowing into the continent. The continent is an investment destination of choice. Under the Presidential Infrastructure Championing Initiative, where each head of state and government is a political champion, water and sanitation, potable water, energy, electrification, schools, clinics and hospitals, dams, bridges, airports, harbors, and shipping lines will be expanded and constructed where they don't exist. For instance, South Africa will be a hub for ship repairs and docking. Honorable members, step by step, brick by brick, Africa is indeed walking its talk. In June 2015, the tripartite free trade area agreement was concluded by 26 countries, and this involves a population of 600 million and a combined domestic product of $1 trillion, and will create a single economic market of $6 trillion. Another advantage is that Africa is home to the world's largest population of 15 to 24-year-olds, and this is estimated to double by 2045. Cities are expanding, and an estimated 60% will be urbanized. To attend to the ICT research and the ocean economy, the AU has decided to establish the Pan-African University. This university aims to prioritize science, technology, and innovation research that is uniquely African, and to highlight the kind of work that is coming out of the continent. The regional and continental integration is the foundation for Africa's socio-economic development. Consequently, Africa is at the center of South Africa's foreign policy. Fellow compatriots, the investment and expansion of the blue economy will ensure that marine resources are utilized in a diversified manner. The BRICS Bank has now opened its regional offices here in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and has begun to inject money for development. For instance, South Africa received 180 million for renewable energy, Brazil $300 million, For renewable energy, China, $81 million for rooftop solar developments, and India, $75 million for renewable energy. Noteworthy is the fact that the BRICS Bank will fund infrastructure development to non-member states in the continent. The visit of President Xi Jinping to the FOCAC summit in 2015 culminated in the signing of 23 agreements, amounting to over 100 billion rands, which will be utilized to transfigure the continental economy and the lives of our people. Indeed, Africa is on the irreversible move, other weaknesses notwithstanding. Achtbare voorzitter, volgens hierdie vordering, ek wil graag die oppositie versoek om die ANC-regering te ondersteun om Afrika se ekonomie te herstel, verwerk en herbou. Deur samenwerking sal ons in staat wees om Afrika se toeleindes te bewerkstellig en verwesenlik. Now, the leadership of the African continent has correctly and intelligently responded to the call that was made by Amilcar Cabral. And I want to quote this. He said, always bear in mind that the people are not fighting for ideas, for the things in everyone's head. They are fighting to win material benefits, to live better, in peace, to see their lives go forward, to guarantee the future of their children. Now, I just want to clarify just a few things. Honorable Melder of the Freedom Front says that we must not blame the colonial past, and he has been joined by Honorable James. This is very disingenuous. Most of the countries that are underdeveloped today is because they have been colonized for a long time, and the scars of colonialism and subjugation are unyielding. They are deeply rooted in those countries. I thought that as an Afrikaner you would appreciate what actually happened to you at the hands of the British. But let me make an example. The Freedom Front is still trapped in the past, perhaps still trapped in the ideology of Wetbaskap or white supremacism. I want to draw your attention to your own 2016 manifesto.
Chairperson.
And this is what it says.
Honorable Masango, would you please take your seat? What are you rising on?
May I ask the member a question, not what he says?
Okay.
But he's saying things about me that I never said.
Do you want to take a question, Honorable Masango?
No. No, I just wanted to say to the House and to the South Africans, if the Freedom Front Pass takes itself serious as a non-racial democratic party that loves all the peoples of South Africa, and it thinks that it will have a friendly, constructive engagement with the people of the continent, then it should not say what it is saying in its own manifesto of this year for local government. And I quote it. It says, neem en gelegde besluit. Then it says, ondersteun rechtsstellende actie. That's support for affirmative action. Nee. Ondersteun swart bemagtiging, support for black empowerment. Nee. Grondhervorming, land reform. Nee. Rassekwotasie, wat moet die mensen zeggen? Nee. For what must they say ja? Hulle moet erken die almachtige God en hel grondwet. Now, you see, you go back to the 1910 quotation that proclaimed that South Africa shall be a Christian country, and cared nothing about other religions in this country. The second issue that I think I want to clarify is what Honorable James has said about Dr. Nkosazana Zuma. In fact, Agenda 2063, before the deployment of Comrade Nkosazana Zuma, Africa never had an all-African blueprint, economic, social, political, etc., etc. It has been created after her deployment. That is the legacy that she's leaving there. So you can't say she has been pushed aside. Yes, passing. And I also want to clarify what Honorable Mukhalapa was saying, the issue about human rights. We agree that as the ANC, we agree as ANC and as the people of South Africa, there must be no human rights violations, but the DA is conspicuous by its silence on human rights violations in Gaza, in Western Sahara, in Palestine, and everywhere else. They always turn a blind eye. Now, you need to discuss, say something about that. But also, the other matter is the issue of third termism. You see, if the people of a country, the people of the DRC recently, for instance, have agreed, the court there, Section 75 of the court of the DRC, allows the president to continue if the elections have not been held. In Burundi, the high court there allowed the president to go for a third term. Now, we must respect the sovereignty of other countries. Whether the president goes for the 5th, for the 10th, it must be the decision of the people of that country. But oppressing the people in that country, we also say no. And the dictatorship, as the ANC and as South Africa, we say no. But the terms of government, the issue of al-Bashir, there are two things to this. You focus on the narrow legalistic interpretation of this. You fail to look at the broad national interest of both South Africa and the continent. One is that the AU took a decision that all the member states must ignore the ICC to the extent that they have got certain issues with the ICC, the perception being that it persecutes Africans. And secondly, as a disciplined member of the AU, because we fought within the OAU and the AU for the liberation of Africa, we can't now act outside that body until a decision is taken. Just imagine what would have happened to our 3,000 soldiers that are in Sudan, our peacekeeping force in DRC, our peace efforts everywhere, the 185 billion that we get out of trading in the continent. If we arrested the head of state, we would have been the first one. Why are other countries not arresting him? They know where to find him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sithokoze amalunga ahloniphekileko wendlu. Ihlelo lalamhlanje lifihle sifike ekupheleni. Kwanje siza kusukuma indlu ingajana. Sithokoze.